I have a sweet at the end of the world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276 Under the Deep Sea. After getting the equipment from Jiang Chen returned to the villa, tiptoed back to his bedroom, and started the journey. When he came out of the bathroom, he looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. He tiptoed to the bed, looked at Liu Yao's peaceful sleeping face and evenly rising and falling chest. Jiang Chen lay down beside her, and then closed his eyes. The next morning, although he slept very late yesterday, when the first ray of sunlight shone into the house in the morning, Jiang Chen was the first to wake up. He got out of bed quietly. He did not wake Liu Yao up, but just left a note on the table, then put on his shirt and went out. He took a taxi to the eastern suburbs of Auckland. Jiang Chen walked along the coastline for a while, and found the fishery on the map. Pulling the owner of the fishery, Jiang Chen didn't waste any words. He pointed directly to the speedboat with a rear cabin, parked at the dock, and asked how much it cost. Although the New Zealander insisted on not selling at first, when he heard Jiang Chen raise the price to 10,000 New Zealand dollars and was about to leave, the brown-skinned old fisherman hurriedly grabbed him and said the deal was done. 10,000 New Zealand dollars could almost buy 2 boats. Not to mention that he had used this speedboat for more than a year. After the transfer was completed, the guy threw all the relevant certificates and keys into Jiang Chen's hands. As for whether Jiang Chen had a driving certificate or something, he did not ask again, but at Jiang Chen's request, he simply taught Jiang Chen the operating essentials for half an hour. The driving of this speedboat was relatively simple. Under the guidance of the old fisherman, Jiang Chen almost learned how to drive this thing after circling the offshore. Although the old fisherman looked at him with worried eyes when he got off the speedboat, but Jiang Chen did not pay much attention to it and directly turned on the GPS navigator, pushed the speed to the maximum, and rushed towards the sea northwest of Port Jackson. The Hauraki Gulf is still calm today. It was also because there were no big waves that Jiang Chen's simple and rough way of driving the boat by stepping on the accelerator did not overturn the boat. When the speedboat arrived at the sea area where the yacht passed yesterday afternoon, as Jiang Chen expected, his ep equipped with a 4-dimensional transmitter received the mysterious signal again. Seeing this, Jiang Chen immediately slowed down the speed while steadying the heavy steering wheel, while closely watching the changes in the signal strength on the ep. After cruising around for a long time, Jiang Chen finally selected 3 points with the same signal index and marked them on the paper map. The next thing was much simpler. Connecting the 3 points, and then making the circumscribed circle of the triangle. Jiang Chen quickly determined the approximate 2-dimensional coordinates of the signal source. Done. Jiang Chen wiped his sweat, grinned, threw the pencil in his hand aside, and drove the boat to the top of the signal source. Staring at the screen of the ep, Jiang Chen vaguely saw a line of blurred letters. However, because it was too blurry, he could only recognize the initial capital letter. Is that hello? Jiang Chen muttered to himself and turned off the throttle. He took out the K-1B mechanical exoskeleton from the storage space and put it on neatly. Oxygen. 100% structural damage, none airtightness, normal. After glancing at the instrument screen on his right arm and confirming that all parameters were normal, Jiang Chen walked to the side of the speedboat. I hope there won't be a strong wind. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Chen stepped into the water. Plop. With the rising bubbles, Jiang Chen gradually sank to the bottom of the sea. This was his first time trying to dive far away from the shore. When diving near Great Barrier Island, he could usually see the coral reefs on the seabed after diving about 2 or 3 meters. But now, there was only deep darkness under his feet. The light and sound around him gradually faded away, and the unique depth and silence under the sea level gradually spread. Current altitude, -20 meter distance to the seabed. 71 meters, it's damn deep. Jiang Chen couldn't help but complain in a low voice while looking at the instrument. In order to dispel the claustrophobic feeling lingering in his heart, he stretched out his finger and tapped the screen on his right arm, turning on the searchlights on his helmet and feet. The sudden light scared the little guys swimming peacefully nearby and made them run away. It took more than 2 minutes before Jiang Chen approached the seabed. The colorful corals and fish, as well as the water plants swaying neatly with the water flow, were so beautiful under the light. However, because he had already watched these underwater scenes yesterday afternoon, Jiang Chen did not linger on these shocking scenes. He tapped the screen on his right arm again and started the data exchange between the mechanical exoskeleton computer and EP. The snow was white, but the hidden letters were much clearer than on the sea surface. H. Help? Help? Is it a distress signal? Jiang Chen frowned and looked around. There were no unusual objects around, and it was obvious that there was an error in the 3-point positioning. However, this was inevitable. After all, Jiang Chen did not have any measuring equipment and only used a pencil to make a rough manual measurement on the painting. Shaking the fins on his feet, Jiang Chen tilted his body, swam around nearby, and then swam in the direction where the signal strength gradually increased. The road conditions on the seabed were not smooth. Before he swam 20 meters, a dark fracture appeared in front of Jiang Chen. The light shone, but he could not see the bottom. Looking at the abyss-like trench, Jiang Chen glanced at the instrument on his right arm. Current altitude, -101 meters distance from the seabed. Unknown. Has the bottom been reached? Or is the bottom a fluid substance such as magma, causing the ranging laser to be unable to respond due to the scattering effect? Jiang Chen couldn't help but frown. No matter which possibility it was, it didn't seem to be a good thing. According to Jiang Lin, the original design of this K-1B was for amphibious operations, not deep sea diving, so the safe depth of diving was only within 150 meters. After hesitating for a while, Jiang Chen took a deep breath and swam towards the bottom of the unfathomable trench. As he expected, as he continued to dive, the signal received by the EP became stronger and stronger. 210 meters, 243 meters, 332 meters. The world record of scuba diving was surpassed by Jiang Chen without knowing it. Feeling the terrifying pressure coming from all directions, Jiang Chen gritted his teeth and breathed air into his lungs that were compressed to the limit. Fortunately, the compressed gas stored in the oxygen cylinder was helium and oxygen. If it was nitrogen and oxygen, the nitrogen dissolved in his body tissues alone would have made him fall into a coma. 420 meters. Finally, the signal began to decay as the depth decreased. Jiang Chen's eyes flashed with joy, and he swam back 2 or 3 meters, then began to search along the dark rock wall. Fortunately, he had injected genetic drugs. If it were an ordinary person, he would have been squeezed to internal bleeding by the water pressure of about 40 atmospheres. Finally, next to a rugged reef pillar, Jiang Chen saw an extremely unusual protrusion. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Jiang Chen swam towards the stone pillar with his fins swung faster. His fingers touched the cold stone pillar, and he gently applied force. Jiang Chen let the inertia drive him to float behind the stone pillar. Light sprinkled on the black iron that had not seen the sun for decades. The swaying water plants disturbed the silence. My God. Staring blankly at the scenery in front of him, Jiang Chen forgot to breathe for a moment. Like a gust of wind, it carried the clean particles and brushed past the dusty history. When the sand of time slipped away, the buried secret was destined to see the light of day again. Chapter 277 U-235. It was a submarine. It was about 90 meters long. Its displacement was unknown, but it was definitely over 1,000 tons. Like a magic needle, it was deeply embedded in the rugged stone wall. Most of the surface was covered with unknown algae, and the cracks were glued together by the remains of soft-bodied creatures. Rust mottled the iron sheet, but the white paint that symbolized its identity had not faded. Reaching out his hand, he touched the cold iron wall through his gloves. Gently brushing the soft and slippery seaweed, Jiang Chen murmured a line of dead characters. U-235. If he remembered correctly, there should be only one series of submarines in the world that began with U, German U-boats. Jiang Chen was not a military fan. His understanding of this thing basically came from a British documentary about World War II and several Hollywood movies. Those ghosts active below the sea level lingered in the hearts of the Allied forces like nightmares, tormenting merchant ships and transport ships sailing on the Atlantic. It tore apart the supply lines between the Free World and the British Isles, and tied down the Allied naval forces. It was not until Germany surrendered in 1945 that these submarines sank or landed, a legacy of the Third Reich. The signal source came from inside, pushing the submarine's hull. Jiang Chen used the reaction force to move back a short distance and took a look at the submarine in full view with the help of the light above his head. After all, after being in the water for so many years, the surface of the submarine was severely corroded. Fortunately, the overall structure of the submarine was still intact, and it should not disintegrate when exploring the interior. When falling into the trench, the submarine should have been hit hard. Just from the appearance, several dents and leaking cracks left by the impact can be found. Along the outside of the submarine, Jiang Chen swam to the submarine deck. The barrel of the 88mm deck gun was twisted into a curved shape, and a creature similar to a shrimp lived in the barrel. Without disturbing those little guys, Jiang Chen bypassed the rotten cannon and swam directly to the entrance of the submarine. Unfortunately, the iron door was rusted shut. Jiang Chen, who had no welding equipment, had to give up the iron door and look for other entrances. The goddess of luck favored him again. About 5 meters away from the submarine's torpedo launch port, Jiang Chen found a crack about 1 person wide. Looking at the dark interior, Jiang Chen swallowed his saliva, took out an underwater flare from his waist, and threw it in. The orange-red light illuminated the interior of the submarine. After confirming that there were no dangerous marine creatures lurking inside, Jiang Chen swam in. What are these? Looking at the large black containers, he couldn't help muttering. His intuition told him that there should be something incredible inside. In addition to those containers with unknown contents, Jiang Chen also found several skeletons in Nazi uniforms. These skeletons lay quietly in the corners of the cabin. The flesh on their bodies had been eroded by scavengers, and the hollows of the skeletons were blocked by seaweed, which looked very disgusting. For safety reasons, Jiang Chen did not open the containers immediately, but instead searched for the signal source and headed deeper into the cabin. Fortunately, when the submarine sank, the hatches were not closed. Otherwise, if they were rusted, it would be really difficult to deal with. Is it just in front? The picture on the right arm screen was completely clear. Jiang Chen's eyes were fixed on the signal strength indicator on the upper right side of the screen. Through the weak signal strength difference, he knew that he was gradually approaching the signal source. What is this submarine used for? Is it for transportation? Glancing at the containers piled along the way, Jiang Chen couldn't help but complain. At this moment, his right arm felt a vibration, which came from the app under the diving suit. Jiang Chen was stunned and clicked on the screen of the right arm of the mechanical exoskeleton, switching to the app interface. Environmental Radiation Index 5 radiation? Where does the radiation come from? Jiang Chen frowned, but didn't take it to heart. Although this amphibious mechanical exoskeleton did not contain radiation protection materials, the iodine stored in the app was enough to offset this level of radiation. Moreover, compared to the radiation in the apocalypse, this level of low radiation could be described as a drizzle. What puzzled him was why radiation was detected on this U-boat. After passing through an open hatch, this should be the room where the signal source was located. Jiang Chen took out a flare from his waist again and threw it into the center of the room, decorating the entire room into an orange-red world. There were 2 large wooden boxes in the room. The wooden surface had rotted, and one of the boxes was open. After dimming the searchlight on his helmet, Jiang Chen approached the wooden box. The wooden box contained 5 cylinders of unknown material, with the words Japanese Army on them. On the wall behind the wooden box, there were crystal clear eggs, a bit like octopus eggs, but it was not known whether some kind of mutation had occurred under this weak radiation, and these eggs were a bit abnormal in size and shape. Enriched uranium? No. Germany should not have been able to make an atomic bomb in history. In that case, it should be uranium compounds, or uranium whose purity has not yet reached weapon grade. Jiang Chen muttered to himself while floating next to the cylinder. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Chen threw all the cylinders into the storage space. According to a rough estimate, these nuclear materials must weigh at least 500 kilograms. They can produce radioactivity, so they should have been initially purified. Although it is not clear what the market price of these things is, it would not be an exaggeration to sell them for hundreds of millions of dollars on the black market. Of course, Jiang Chen would not sell this thing out. After destroying all the mutant octopus eggs, Jiang Chen continued to search in the room. In the corner of the room, he finally found the source of the signal. The black suitcase was locked. Jiang Chen threw it into the storage space first, preparing to study it carefully after landing. However, at this moment, a black shadow was projected on the wall in front of Jiang Chen. With a warning sign in his heart, Jiang Chen suddenly activated the cylinder propulsion device behind him. High pressure gas was ejected instantly. With the help of the reaction force and the cover of a large number of small bubbles, Jiang Chen rushed to another corner of the room. Boom. Like a hammer, a tentacle hit the bulkhead fiercely, making a terrifying dent in the iron shell. The figure was a giant octopus. After squeezing into the door, the huge body blocked the exit tightly. Thinking of the octopus eggs that he had crushed, Jiang Chen finally understood why this guy was so angry. It seems that this mutant octopus is the mother of those little monsters. Fuck. Cursing secretly, Jiang Chen quickly pulled out the underwater pistol from his waist. However, before he could fire, 4 tentacles attacked like pythons and clamped his limbs. Jiang Chen's face flushed red, and he used his muscles to the limit, but the thick tentacles did not move at all. Being caught by a living creature, he really did not dare to risk activating the time travel. The size of this octopus was much larger than the lead mutant last time, and it was unknown how much energy was needed to inactivate all the cells in its body. He did not want to risk overheating the time travel bracelet and play that risky trick again. The ink with toxins sprayed out, but it was useless to Jiang Chen, a human who did not need gills to breathe. Frenzy. A fierce light flashed in his pupils, and his muscles were tensed to the limit. Jiang Chen held the gun tightly, broke the powerful tentacle, and pulled the trigger before the octopus put its mouth full of keratin jaws like blades towards him. Bang! Accompanied by several dull gunshots and a series of dense bubbles as dense as beans. The special ammunition penetrated the octopus's forehead fiercely. Blue blood flowed out, blooming purple light under the orange-red light. Jiang Chen did not have the leisure to appreciate this scene. He held the trigger tightly, venting the murderous intent in his heart. The tentacles tied to his limbs gradually lost their strength. The fierce creature lost its voice only after the magazine was almost empty. Chapter 278, Secrets of World War II. Uranium? Where did you get it from? Linling glanced at the bucket that Jiang Chen had thrown in the corner with disdain, as if she was looking at something dirty. During the arm wrestling with the mutant octopus, the drive system of the mechanical exoskeleton was slightly damaged because Jiang Chen turned on the frenzy. In order to prevent a sudden breakdown when returning to the sea surface, after dealing with the mutant octopus, Jiang Chen took the briefcase back to the end of the world. After throwing the equipment to Jiang Lin for repair, Jiang Chen then found Linling. Although our technology is a bit backward, we still have things like atomic bombs. Really? The speed of clicking the technology tree is unexpectedly fast. Have we entered the atomic age? Linling lifted her long silver hair and sat on the office chair. Then what? Why did you bring this thing to my laboratory? I want to ask, how many nuclear bombs can be made with these more than 500 kilograms of uranium? Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Linling was slightly stunned, pinched her chin and thought for a moment before answering. Nuclear bomb? That depends on the type. If it's just uranium-235, it can only be used to make the most primitive fission bomb. In addition, the abundance of uranium-235 must be considered. Assuming that this batch of materials can be purified into 100 kilograms of enriched uranium. With the pre-war technology, 12 nuclear bombs with a ton equivalent of tantalum can be made. If it is the technology level at the beginning of the atomic age, 50 kilograms of enriched uranium can have about 1 kilogram to complete the chain reaction, and about 2 bombs can be made. Is that so? Jiang Chen nodded thoughtfully. Are you going to let me help you make nuclear bombs? Is it possible? The tactical nuclear bombs seized from the 6th block have all been used on the W-1 ballistic missiles deployed in every corner of Qingpu. In the wasteland with scarce resources, these remaining nuclear weapons are used up as little as possible. 100 puddings, lemon flavored. Linling said bluntly. Deal. Jiang Chen said happily. It's really cheap. Surprisingly, after hearing Jiang Chen's promise, Linling did not show her usual joyful expression, but instead looked at Jiang Chen meaningfully. I have to say one more thing. This thing is poison. Hearing this, Jiang Chen was stunned for a moment, and then fell silent. After a moment, he spoke. I will use it with caution. Well, that's good. Linling nodded, and a smile appeared on her porcelain doll-like face. If possible, I would like to continue to eat the pudding you brought. The unnatural light passed through the window eaves, and for some reason, it made that beautiful smile tainted with a sense of sadness. Speaking of which, this world was destroyed by nuclear weapons. Subtly shifting his gaze, Jiang Chen took out the black suitcase from the storage space and changed the previous topic. Can you help me take a look at this thing? What is this thing? Looking at the suitcase placed on the table by Jiang Chen, Linling's face showed an expression of interest. I found it on a U-boat. During World War II, the Axis submarine was a special antique. Oh, World War II? That's a long time ago. Linling took the suitcase. Her electronic eyes shrank slightly, and she carefully examined the surface texture and asked casually, what's special about it? It can stimulate clean particle waves. That's impossible. Linling rejected it flatly and turned on the four-dimensional communication device on the table. People in the atomic age can't even observe dimensions. How can they realize the existence of clean particles? However, just halfway through the words, Linling's voice rose. There was no sound, only 4 letters. Help this is impossible. Wait, this is just a semi-finished product. No, even if it is a semi-finished product, it is absolutely impossible to do it with the technological level of the atomic age. Linling widened her eyes and said in disbelief. Seeing Linling's astonishment, Jiang Chen's face showed a trace of confusion. Semi-finished product? Can you explain it? Hearing Jiang Chen's question, Linling glanced at Jiang Chen. Think carefully. When you were communicating with me using the 4-dimensional transmitter, did the signal strength change with the change of position? It seems not. That's the problem. Linling tapped her finger on the suitcase. The signal strength of the clean particle wave propagating in the 4-dimensional will not decay with the change of the 3-dimensional coordinates. It is better to say that it does not have physical properties such as energy and speed at all. It is just a wave that exists in a concept. It can receive a specific signal at a specific time point. It's that simple. Can it be received in any corner of the universe? Jiang Chen couldn't help but be moved. Yes, so it is also called the communication particle in the interstellar era. After all, if electromagnetic waves are used for communication, there will be a delay of 1 second from the Earth to the Moon, and it will take more than half a year to reach the Oort cloud, the boundary of the solar system. It is not restricted by the 3-dimensionality at all. As long as the same time coordinates are broadcast, any corner of the universe can receive the signal. But even before the war, this kind of thing was considered cutting-edge science. Even I can only transmit information between 2 homologous subcrystals in a resonant way, Linling said. It was really amazing. Compared with electromagnetic waves were more like carrier pigeons. Why does the signal emitted by this thing decay with distance? Jiang Chen asked in confusion. So it is a semi-finished product. In other words, the maker did not understand the principle of this thing at all. He just copied a drawing or something like that and made a similar thing. Linling sighed, paused, and gave a fairly common example. It's like I have a mobile phone in my hand. I handed it to a primitive man and told him that he could use this thing to call me. But he had never seen this thing before. He had always used carrier pigeons to communicate information and had no idea what a phone call was. So he used a stupid method, which was to carve words on the phone case with a knife and then tie the phone to the feet of a carrier pigeon and mail it to me. Jiang Chen couldn't help laughing, but then he showed a look of realization on his face. Could it be that the message came from the future, sending the blueprints for making 4-dimensional communication equipment to the past? Someone copied the blueprint and made the communication equipment, but didn't know how to make a phone call, so he used electromagnetic waves to broadcast the signal of the clean particle wave in the 3 dimensions. That's possible. Linling did not deny Jiang Chen's point of view. Let's assume that the video you showed me last time was the mature clean particle communication technology. The phrase hello, which symbolizes friendship, was a greeting from the future people to the primitive people over there. While saying hello, they also brought you some cutting-edge technology. Among those technologies is the manufacturing process of the clean particle communication equipment. Those black technologies? Thinking of the black technologies that the Third Reich brought out during World War II, Jiang Chen couldn't help but have a strange expression on his face. That's right. Linling nodded. Remember what I told you last time? Some people will translate these signals into video information in the form of dreams under the strong influence of this special wave. However, these specially constructed brains can only passively receive messages. It's like talking to a mute on the phone. You can't know if the other party is listening to you. If you want to confirm whether the people in the past have received those messages, what you need to do is also very simple. That is, send them the way to speak and the coordinates together. Then did this line of help get heard by the people in the future? Obviously not. Linling sighed and reached out to turn off the four-dimensional communication device. That person obviously overestimated the understanding ability of primitive people. No matter how strong the carrier pigeon is, it can't fly across the distance of time. It seems that until its demise, the Third Reich was unable to get in touch with the voice from the future. Jiang Chen didn't say anything, just looked at the suitcase quietly, thinking about something. Can I open this box? Linling pointed at the suitcase. Of course, but I don't have the key to open it, and I'm not sure if there are any booby traps in the box. Jiang Chen shrugged. This is easy. Linling raised a proud smile and placed the box on her experimental equipment. I'm not stupid enough to be ambushed by the traps of primitive people. However, the box was not booby trapped and was easily opened. A black metal ball slightly larger than a baseball and a notebook. This is. Jiang Chen picked up the black ball and carefully observed its surface. There were no cracks on the surface, and it didn't look like it could be opened. In an inconspicuous place, Jiang Chen found a line of neat small words. German. Jiang Chen was in trouble now, as he only knew one foreign language. Use this. Linling threw a translucent graphene card into Jiang Chen's hand. As long as the handwriting is not particularly sloppy, it can be easily translated into any common language. Fuck, it's amazing. Jiang Chen said in shock. Seeing Jiang Chen's shocked expression, Linling raised a smug smile. She just admired his country bumpkin behavior. This made her feel like a god, who could be worshipped by believers just by giving alms casually. Although this thing could not be considered as her making, it was just found by the scavenging team and she repaired it. Usually, such things would be thrown into the refining furnace to recycle useful materials. After all, there was no need for translation in the end times. The reason why this thing was repaired was mainly because of Yao's request. After all, as a cyborg, Linling herself did not need such a thing. Golden apple. Jiang Chen read it out in a low voice, after sticking the translation card on the line of small characters. It was obviously a pure black metal ball, but it was called a golden apple. Give it to me to study. You just look at the notebook. Linling took the golden apple from Jiang Chen's hand, and walked towards an experimental instrument impatiently. Jiang Chen could understand her impatience. This feeling was roughly equivalent to finding a mobile phone in an ancient tomb of the Han Dynasty. Jiang Chen picked up the notebook and opened its cover. This is a diary. Perhaps the secret is hidden in this diary. Chapter 279 Golden Apple. 1945. It was raining in Berlin. Everyone had a gloomy expression on their face, just like the dark clouds lingering over Berlin. Bad news came from afar. After several days of fierce street fighting, Vienna finally fell into the hands of the Soviet army. At the same time, Königsberg also fell. The polar bears finally fulfilled their dream, that had not been fulfilled for centuries, to occupy the capital of East Prussia. There has been no good news from the East Front for a long time, and the situation on the West Front is roughly the same. Anyone can see that the empire is about to end. As a soldier, perhaps I should not make too many comments on the future of the empire, but from the perspective of a husband and a father, I hope that the Americans can get to Berlin first. What am I talking about? On April 14th, the fog lifted, and maybe it will clear up soon. There is good news. No worse news has been heard from either the East Front or the West Front. There is no better news than no news, but everyone knows that this is just the calm before the storm. In the morning, I received an order to transfer my job. Should we say that this moment has finally come? Even as a civilian, I have reached the moment when I have to pick up a rifle and shed my last drop of blood for this empire. However, things were far from what I thought, and you will never guess what I saw. In the basement of the Chancellery in Berlin, I actually met the Führer. I can't describe the excitement in my heart at this moment. I haven't heard his inspiring speech for a long time. Many people said that he had fled with his mistress, but at this moment, all the rumors were refuted. He is still in Berlin. He is still standing with us. Although his face is a little more haggard than the last time he appeared in public. But his voice is still so contagious. He talked to me for half an hour and asked me a lot of things. It is hard to imagine that a small person like me was actually received by him. Sitting face to face with the great man, talking about the past of Berlin. At the end of the topic, he asked about my loyalty. I said, if you need me, I can pick up a gun and die for you right now, whether I die in the east or the west. He said, compared to dying, I have a more important task to give you. Unbelievably, the Führer personally awarded me the Iron Cross. I was terrified. I had not made any military achievements, and I was not even a soldier fighting on the front line. How could I be worthy of such a great honor? However, he dispelled my concerns. If you can complete the task I am about to give you, your contribution to the Third Reich will be worthy of this medal. I took a locked suitcase from his hand. Then, I was taken out of the basement. I didn't even get to see my wife and daughter for the last time. I boarded a Me-262B jet and flew to Norway. To be honest, I didn't want to see them for the last time, because I had a hunch that this might be a one-way ticket. April 15th, sunny. Perhaps this is the last time I record the weather in my diary, at least for a few months. We set out from the bottom of the sea and sailed with the friendly ship U-234 one after another, heading for the same destination along different routes, the Far East, Japan. It was not until the moment I boarded the ship that I realized the seriousness of the matter. There were a total of 14 people, including me, and every crew member was a big shot, and the lowest rank was a lieutenant colonel. If it weren't for the Iron Cross medal, I don't know if they would look at me, a small person, in the eye. But the interesting thing is that no one paid attention to the medal on my chest, but was more interested in the briefcase in my hand. According to etiquette, everyone introduced themselves. Air Force Commander, Army Colonel, Shipborne Anti-Aircraft Artillery Technical Expert, and me, a signalman at the intelligence station. They are all the elites of the empire. Why are they sitting here? Sitting with a small person like me, taking a U-boat to perform a message mission? April 20th. According to the captain, we are now sailing on the North Atlantic, heading towards the South Atlantic. Because we have arrived at the sea, someone finally stood up and introduced the details of the mission to us. This submarine carries the most advanced military technology of the Third Reich, such as V2 rocket parts and drawings, Junkers jet engines, Tiger tank drawings, and all parts and design drawings of Me-262 jet fighters. These military technology and weapon samples will be taken to Tokyo. As for the 10 barrels, the captain did not know the details, but generally described it as the raw material of some kind of weapon. The atmosphere in the submarine was very silent. People communicated in low voices, or simply spent their time sleeping to reduce the time they woke up. The only person who was willing to talk to me was a nuclear physicist named Fabian. Although I don't understand what nuclear physics is, it doesn't hinder our friendship. He said that in such an environment, only by maintaining communication between people can we maintain mental health. I agree with his point of view. In addition to writing diaries, we will talk about other things. April 22nd. Today we talked about nuclear physics, although I don't understand what it is at all. U-235. According to Fabian, this is a group of ominous letters and numbers. It was the number of the U-boat, and also the abbreviation of the isotope 235 of uranium. I didn't understand what uranium-235 meant, but I heard him say that it could be used to make a very powerful bomb. He told me mysteriously that if we could bring these 10 barrels of uranium oxide to Japan, we would change history. I ignored it. Even though I had never been to the battlefield, I knew that a few bombs alone were not enough to turn the tide of a war. If we could, we would have done it long ago. We had dropped at least 10,000 bombs on London. These bombs are different from the previous ones. Really? Compared with the V2 rockets? Fabian just smiled disdainfully. Comparable to the sum of the V1 and V2 rockets launched at London. Well, I think he has begun to be mentally unbalanced. May 4th. The situation is getting worse and worse. The Goliath signal station responsible for providing us with instructions suddenly lost contact. Then, the Navy's main communication station near Berlin-Neukölln also lost contact. With a telegram received intermittently, the thing we were most worried about still happened. Germany has announced its surrender, and the Imperial Navy Command at Dunetz ordered all U-boats to surface immediately, hoist the black flag, and surrender to the Allies nearby. Faced with this telegram, everyone was silent. Some people suggested that this might be a conspiracy of the Allied Intelligence Department, but others pointed out that it might be true. After all, the moment they boarded the submarine, Berlin was already in danger. The deputy captain suggested turning on the radio silence and confirming the authenticity of the intelligence with nearby submarines. However, the captain did not accept his proposal and gave instructions to continue sailing. U-235 is not in the organization and directly obeys the head of state without the need to obey Dunetz. Target Tokyo, continue to carry out the mission. In any case, the submarine continued to sail. But I can clearly feel that not everyone is satisfied with this order, including the captain himself. May 10th. We have just passed Argentina and entered the Pacific Ocean from the southernmost tip of South America. So far, we should have completely escaped the encirclement and blockade of the Allies. However, no one was happy about this good news. Germany has surrendered, and we are German soldiers. Is it necessary for us to continue fighting? Perhaps we should surrender to the nearby Allied forces. As long as we are careful not to be encountered by the British, the Americans should let us go home. After all, we have not committed any crimes. This U-boat has not even fired a torpedo since it set out. May 11th. Unfortunate things happened again, but not from outside the submarine, but from inside the submarine. Someone died. The deceased was Lieutenant Commander Bertram. He took an overdose of sleeping pills and committed suicide. May 14th. When I wrote this diary, Fabian went crazy and muttered something madly. I couldn't understand his nonsense, such as that's not physics at all. We got it wrong from the beginning. Not atoms. No, it's not matter at all. It's not that it can't be observed with existing technology, but that it doesn't exist at all. He found me and confessed to me that he was the holder of the key and begged me to take out the suitcase. I refused him, and the Fuhrer gave me the task of sending it to Tokyo, and no one could open the suitcase before that. Seeing my firm attitude, he did not insist. June 1st. Originally, we were supposed to reach Okinawa before the 10th, and then enter a safe route and sail directly to Tokyo. However, something unexpected happened. After arriving in the South Pacific, we turned on the radio silence, but what greeted us was not the Japanese Navy, but American ships. The side of the submarine was hit, but fortunately we escaped. It seems that Japan has been completely defeated by the Americans in the Pacific War. Thinking pessimistically, Okinawa may have changed hands. June 2nd. The captain found Fabian. If these 520 kilograms of uranium are delivered to Tokyo, can it change the outcome of the war? Fabian did not answer directly. Even if the United States loses New York within a month, can it change the outcome of the war? The captain was silent. Everyone knows that, when the war has progressed to this point, the outcome can no longer be reversed by a city or a pond. Where is the suitcase? Fabian just shook his head. It's too late. June 4th. In order to avoid the search of anti-submarine reconnaissance aircraft, we had to change our course and turn back to New Zealand. Some people said that there were enough supplies on the submarine, and we should find a small island to spend the rest of our lives. However, some people refuted this view. After all, not everyone committed war crimes. Many people still have families and are eager to know their safety. In the end, the Allies made a choice for us. On Little Barrier Island, we were surrounded by ships coming from 3 directions. Surrender or fight to the end? Surprisingly, the captain actually asked for my opinion, even though he had not spoken to me since boarding the ship. To be honest, I have a beautiful wife and a lovely daughter. I don't want to die. Although I'm ashamed of the iron cross on my chest, I choose to surrender. Hearing my thoughts, the captain was relieved. It was as if the burden on his shoulders was finally lifted, and he actually said thank you to me. June 5th. Sudden rebellion. The captain died, shot. Fabian died, but he died of suicide. Now there are 7 people left, all of whom are war criminals except me. Some people suggested that I be executed because I betrayed the will of the Fuhrer. However, some people said that I didn't need to be executed, but just locked up. Those who refused to surrender proposed to drive the submarine into the Hauraki Gulf to avoid the search by doing the opposite. Fortunately, we found a trench near Port Jackson. As long as we hide in it, no one can find us. The supplies are enough for us to hide until the end of this year. When the storm passes, we will land in Australia and live the rest of our lives in anonymity. The diary ends here. The last page is traced with the emblem of the Iron Cross in pencil. The note is very beautiful, and it should be written in the artistic font of the time. With the help of the translator, Jiang Chen read the last line of the diary. To Milos Motherland, Elias, this submarine named U-235, the last hope of the Third Reich, eventually sank forever in the trench, and the diary did not record the specific reason for the submarine sinking. But Jiang Chen can be sure that this man named Elias must have opened a suitcase. Otherwise, this diary would not have appeared in the suitcase. Based on the contents of the diary, Jiang Chen could infer that perhaps knowing that his fate was about to end, Hitler placed all his hopes on the disobedient ally in the Far East. He put all the black technology into this submarine, and even had this briefcase that can talk to aliens. However, this U-235 obviously failed to reverse the wheel of history. 2 months later, the United States ended the war with 2 atomic bombs. Do you know what this sphere is? Linling let out a long breath and ended her analysis of the sphere in the briefcase. What is it? Jiang Chen felt vaguely that this thing might be related to the black technology that Germany had taken out during World War II, and the word help was probably a signal for help sent to the future man, a transmitter of clean particles. Linling pointed to the line of small characters engraved on the shell of the ball. Although the workmanship is rough, it is indeed stimulating clean particle waves, although it is doing useless work of broadcasting to the space and time. Is there anything else special? Remember what I told you? Every conscious carbon-based life has a very small amount of clean particles, and they are usually stored in the back of the brain. So, Jiang Chen vaguely realized something, and a chill could not help but crawl through his body. Linling took a deep breath and spoke quickly. An entire iron ball of brain extract. This is a piece of artificial subcrystal, using the brains of more than 10,000 people. 10,000 people, just to convey the word help, that will never be heard. It's crazy. Jiang Chen swallowed his saliva, and said with difficulty. But what shocked me the most was not these 10,000 lives. Linling paused, and then said, the target coordinates of the signal transmission came from the void. What the hell is the void? Jiang Chen couldn't help asking. In short, behind the wormhole, all physical concepts such as space and time are chaos. So, remember the story I told you about the 6 interstellar colony ships? 3 of them were heading for the wormhole. Chapter 280. The puppy begs for mercy. Behind the wormhole is the void, and there is no concept of time in the void. No matter how long the 3 colony ships have been lost in the void, as long as they can finally get out of it, then for the outside world, it will only take a moment for them to enter and leave. However, what was transmitted to Jiang Chen's world was only a signal, not 3 interstellar colony ships from the future. Based on this fact, Linling can only come up with such a conjecture. The 3 colony ships were eventually imprisoned in the void forever, becoming a quantum state-like existence relative to the universe outside the wormhole, neither born nor dead. As for the reason for sending that signal and imparting black technology to the past, it is also easy to understand. Its purpose should be to change the historical trend after World War II, so as to avoid the occurrence of World War III. According to Linling, in the world history of the end of the world, the atomic age was entered after the end of World War II. The way the US military ended World War II was not the 2 atomic bombs, but the implementation of Olympic operation, landing on Kyushu Island, the southernmost island of Japan, and then marching towards Honshu Island. It was an amphibious landing operation larger than the Normandy landing. In addition to the troops in the Pacific Theater, 15 Army divisions and 63 Air Force squadrons were drawn from the European theater. Although the Allies had the advantage in firepower from the air and the sea, they did push the devils away. However, under Japan's crazy local decisive battle strategy, Western countries still paid a tragic price for it, laying the foundation for the vitality of the Soviet Union and the rise of pan-Asian cooperation. However, in Jiang Chen's history, that battle did not happen at all. In any case, that signaled a change history. Unfortunately, the world did not change at all because of this. The efforts made by the 3 colony ships were all based on the premise that the MWI theory, parallel universe theory, was not valid. Unfortunately, Jiang Chen's appearance happened to provide evidence to prove the validity of the MWI theory. The 3 colony ships exiled by the wormhole simply created another historical trend. The 2 worlds are like parallel lines that never intersect. If Jiang Chen had not appeared here by accident, the people of this world, Linling, would not even know that someone had tried to change history. The golden apple was temporarily placed with Linling. Although the workmanship was crude, it was technology from the void after all. Although the primitives could not understand the technological connotation, Linling could. This golden apple was like a high-tech drawing carved on a stone slab. If the technology in it could be absorbed, Linling would be able to make great progress in the field of crane particle research. Jiang Chen took the uranium oxide to the basement of the villa as Linling requested. The uranium oxide would be used to make nuclear bombs, and then designed into guided missiles by Jiang Lin, and finally brought back to the world by Jiang Chen, and deployed in the Panu Islands. After dealing with the uranium oxide, Jiang Chen went to Jiang Lin's laboratory and retrieved the repaired mechanical exoskeleton from there. After putting it on, Jiang Chen lay on the bed and took a deep breath, then started the crossing. The heavy pressure of the deep sea came again. After enduring the initial discomfort, Jiang Chen gradually adapted to this feeling. Pushing open the floating huge octopus corpse, Jiang Chen passed through the hatch and swam towards the exit. The wooden boxes along the way must have been filled with parts of jet fighters and V-2 rockets. In the era of World War II, these equipments were indeed worthy of the title of black technology. However, if they were put into the present, they could only be regarded as antiques. And they were antiques that might bring trouble. Considering this factor, Jiang Chen did not take these antiques with him. He had a hunch that many people must be looking for the lost golden apple. It would be better for the Third Reich to receive these things, or for them to sleep here forever. At the fracture of the side wall of the submarine, he saw the skeleton again. On the chest of the military uniform, there was an iron cross medal. This must be Elias, the Third Reich signalman entrusted with the last mission by the Führer. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Chen reached out and took off the dim medal. Rest in peace. He turned and left after muttering silently. After swimming out of the submarine, Jiang Chen adjusted his body posture, then pressed the button on his right arm and started the propulsion device of the cylinder behind him. A large number of tiny and dense bubbles gushed out. With the thrust of the high-pressure gas, Jiang Chen's altitude rose rapidly and rushed towards the sea surface. The pressure around the body surface gradually reduced until it disappeared. Back on the sea surface, Jiang Chen opened his mask and breathed in the fresh air. It was getting dark. Unconsciously, he had been tossing around on the seabed for so long. Looking around, Jiang Chen immediately showed a bitter smile on his face. The speedboat that had been bought less than a day ago was no longer visible. It was indeed not a wise choice to go out to sea alone. No one stayed on the boat to watch, and the boat was pushed away by the waves in a short while. But fortunately, this place was not far from Jackson Port. Maintaining a diving height of 2 meters, Jiang Chen turned on the thrusters and swam towards the nearest land. Before dark, Jiang Chen finally landed on a secluded beach. After putting his diving gear into the storage space and changing into dry clothes, Jiang Chen took out his phone to confirm his location and then walked towards Port Jackson. He took the boat back to Auckland. When Jiang Chen arrived at the Hilton Hotel, it was already 7 o'clock in the evening. "Why are you back so late?" "I stayed in the hotel all day today and was bored." Seeing Jiang Chen coming back, Liu Yao, who was lying on the bed, pouted and said coquettishly, "Something happened, but I've dealt with it. You didn't stay in the hotel all day to browse Weibo." Walking to the bed and sitting down, Jiang Chen stretched out his hand and patted her and smiled. "No, I also played New Era for a while." Liu Yao smiled and shook the screen of her phone. "I just tried to play it, but I didn't expect it to be quite fun." "How did you come up with such a fun game?" "Team wisdom." Jiang Chen smiled and answered vaguely. Liu Yao smiled with her lips pursed and then pouted again. She turned over lazily and changed her posture. Her black hair fell from her shoulders onto the bed. She pressed her face against Jiang Chen's side. "Oh, I'm so annoyed. I have to go back tomorrow. I really want to play with you for a while longer." "Oh, then stay here," Jiang Chen said with a nonchalant smile. "What about the play?" Liu Yao rolled her eyes at Jiang Chen like a little woman. "It's over." Her cheeks flushed slightly. Liu Yao felt a little moved for a moment, but then shook her head. "No, I'd better go back. If I stay here any longer, I always feel like I'll delay you." Jiang Chen was stunned, looking at the light flashing in her bright eyes. "Thank you," Jiang Chen whispered softly, leaning close to Liu Yao's ear. "You're welcome." Liu Yao playfully approached Jiang Chen's earlobe and bit it lightly. "Compensate me." The warm breeze brushed over the earlobe, sparking a wisp of charming fire. Hearing this, Jiang Chen raised a wicked smile at the corner of his mouth. "Compensation? Can your body bear it?" As he spoke, his hand slid down to her waist. "How do you know, if you don't try?" Liu Yao glanced at Jiang Chen charmingly and pouted. "Begging for mercy is like a puppy." Jiang Chen grinned. "A puppy is a puppy," Liu Yao said stubbornly. 2 hours later, a woof woof full of shame and confusion floated out from the bedroom, and the sound was gentle and beautiful. Chapter 281 The Fuse. The next morning, Jiang Chen sent Liu Yao to the plane. Along the way, except when they were in a taxi, Liu Yao had been holding Jiang Chen's arm, almost hanging her whole body on him. Such a loving look attracted the attention of tourists and passers-by. However, the reason why Liu Yao's posture was so disgusting was not because of any pure reason, but simply because Jiang Chen had tortured her too much last night. Until now, her calves were still trembling and shaking. "You idiot. No, didn't we agree on it?" Barking, calling a puppy means surrender? Liu Yao stumbled accidentally and pinched Jiang Chen's waist in shame and anger. When she thought of how he bullied her last night and howled like a puppy for mercy, she felt ashamed. "Haha, sorry, that sound is too ecstatic." Jiang Chen let the jade hand pinch his waist randomly and smiled wickedly. "Besides, did I say that if you surrender, I will let you go? Pervert." Liu Yao gave Jiang Chen a glare with a smirk and stopped in front of the boarding gate. She lightly lifted the long hair by her ears and used all her strength to stand firm and tiptoed, kissing Jiang Chen lightly on the lips. "Remember to think of me." "Yeah." There was no long farewell. Everything was said without words. Picking up the small suitcase, Liu Yao left reluctantly. Watching the flight go away, Jiang Chen grinned and looked at the clouds in the distance, and the smile on his face gradually calmed down. The vacation is over, and it's time to work. Shaking his head, Jiang Chen walked towards the outside of the airport. After leaving the airport, he did not go back to the hotel directly, but took a taxi to the suburbs. In a park, Jiang Chen saw Zhang yapping, who was wearing a black t-shirt and sitting on a bench, looking around. "Why did you choose to meet in the park?" "I prefer to sit in a cafe, order a cup of coffee and chat slowly," Jiang Chen said casually as he sat on the other side of the bench. "For confidentiality reasons." Zhang yapping looked a little nervous, but his voice was calm. "You think too much. This is New Zealand, not Panu." Seeing his nervous look, Jiang Chen sighed and said, originally, he thought that Panu's opponents would consider it for a week before giving him an answer, but now it seems that they can't wait. It's always better to be careful. Jiang Chen just shrugged his shoulders indifferently to Zhang Yaping's statement and then got to the point. Since you are here, I think your answer should be affirmative. Am I right? Yes, we have no choice. Zhang Yaping nodded and said with difficulty, before discussing the specific content of the aid, may I know what prompted you to make a choice so quickly? Jiang Chen smiled. After hearing Jiang Chen's words, Zhang Yaping was silent for a moment. It's blood. Under Jiang Chen's questioning, he slowly explained the whole story. 2 days ago, just after he returned to the Panu Islands, the political situation began to deteriorate sharply. And all this was because of the arrival of a Chinese, Wang Xianfeng, the business representative of Linhua Group stationed in the Panu Islands. This Chinese businessman seemed to be very familiar with Johnny. The two attended important occasions side by side, took a car together to inspect the investment environment, and finally signed the contract that was called the Fuse. The coastal area of the main island of Koro and most of the land of the second largest island, Garin Island, were sold to Johnny International by Panu President Edward at $5 per square meter. Linhua Group converted it into a tourism industry and various infrastructure. Only half of the $100 million in land transfer proceeds flowed into the national treasury. The remaining $50 million all flowed into Edward's private account in New Zealand. The forced land acquisition caused a large number of farmers and fishermen to lose their homes, and the compensation of $2 per square meter was not enough to make up for their losses. Dissatisfaction led to protests. The hawks within the Liberal Party saw an opportunity and bravely stood up at this critical moment. They called on farmers and fishermen who had lost their land to march and protest in front of the presidential palace. But would Edward care? It was worth it for him to make nearly $100 million in this position, where there was no hope and his status was not as good as that of a district governor in New Zealand. The GDP of the Panu Islands is barely $100 million a year, and the tax revenue is only $1 million. With this money, he can go to any corner of the world to become a rich man after leaving office. Just go to the UK. Although he is of British descent, he has never been there in his life. However, just as he was hypocritically persuading the people to stay calm, an unlucky child threw a rotten banana in his face. Edward was angry. Especially the group of natives laughed unscrupulously, patted the warrior's shoulders like a hero, and linked shoulders with the young man. The next second, the young man fell in a pool of blood. Everyone was stunned when they saw the smoke coming out of the gun muzzle of the guard beside the president. No one expected that a peaceful protest would turn into an armed conflict. However, there were not only guns, but also tanks. The flat-headed chieftain main battle tank was a gift from the United Kingdom to the Panu authorities, and it was also the only heavy equipment on the island. In the 1980s, Britain finally remembered this backward little brother and started negotiations with the Panu authorities to join the Commonwealth. It happened that the British Army was changing its equipment at that time, and the Challenger I replaced the Chieftain equipped in the 1960s, so this Chieftain main battle tank, which had been eliminated, was given to the Panu authorities as a gift. Although the negotiations to join the Commonwealth finally broke down, the people of Panu never expected that the angry Edward would use force to suppress the demonstrators. The streets were stained with blood. Guns and cannons forcibly drove away the protesters. 15 people died, and 57 were injured. The leader of the march, the Panu Liberal Party, was subjected to bloody suppression and hunt. As for the promised compensation, Edward did not pay a penny. He is a devil. Zhang Yaping was so angry that he trembled. Jiang Chen was slightly stunned, closed his eyes and thought for a moment. What is your plan? We need $5 million to buy rifles, anti-tank weapons and ammunition. Zhang Yaping took a deep breath and said slowly, no problem. Can you solve the channel for purchasing weapons? Jiang Chen said softly. We contacted an American named Robert Snow. No, it's better not to reveal these names everywhere. Including me. I don't want you to say to everyone you meet, the one who funded us is Jiang Chen, the major shareholder of Future Technology. Jiang Chen quickly interrupted Zhang Yaping. He was slightly stunned, then he nodded suddenly and said apologetically, sorry, I didn't think it through. I hope you. Of course I will keep this secret. When are you going to start planning? Jiang Chen said happily. Everything is under control. We will start as soon as the funds arrive, Zhang Yaping said in a deep voice. Do you have a plan? Jiang Chen asked softly. We have gathered 400 insurgents. After equipping them with weapons, we will launch an attack on the military camp on Koro Island. Once we capture the armory, we will use the equipment in the armory to arm more citizens. Edward, that scum, will surely bear the wrath of the people of Panu, Zhang Yaping said, gritting his teeth. It can be seen that this guy's rebelling for the first time. How can he reveal his plan casually, even in front of the investors? After hearing his plan, Jiang Chen just nodded and took out his mobile phone. The money has arrived. You can start. Zhang Yaping was stunned. He didn't expect Jiang Chen to pay so readily. No need to sign a contract or anything like that. No need. Jiang Chen waved his hand. You can talk to me after you win. I believe you will keep your promise. For the cause of freedom for all mankind, go, young man. Jiang Chen patted his shoulder. Zhang Yaping looked at Jiang Chen gratefully and nodded solemnly. I will definitely keep my promise. The new Panu government will not forget those who helped it. Okay, go quickly. Jiang Chen waved his hand. Contract? For a government that is still in its infancy, it is no different from a verbal promise. What's more, Jiang Chen didn't care about what benefits this so-called new Panu government could bring him, but what benefits he could get from this civil war. After watching Zhang Yaping get into a taxi and walk away, Jiang Chen got up from the bench in the park. Without putting the phone back in his pocket, Jiang Chen called Roberts. Chapter 282. We are the army. After talking to Roberts on the phone and simply telling him that the next plan could start, Jiang Chen then called his mercenary base in Niger and asked Ivan to take a few brothers to meet him in the Panu Islands. After making these 2 calls, Jiang Chen returned to the hotel and booked a flight ticket for Zhang Mingshan to fly to the Panu Islands. Before the Liberal Party rises up, he still has some preparations to do. The airport in the Panu Islands is as empty as ever, although a new deep water port has been built recently, which has more or less added some popularity to this small island far away from international affairs. Due to many factors such as backward infrastructure and small population base, there are still no unfamiliar faces on this island. In particular, the recent deterioration of the local situation has greatly reduced the investment rating of this place. Although the $10 billion development project has attracted the attention of many capitalists, the project has just begun, and it is still unknown whether the turmoil caused by the forced expropriation of land can be resolved peacefully. If they rashly follow up with the investment at this time, once the protests escalate to armed conflict, not only will this big project become an unfinished project, but the contract they signed with the old regime will also become a waste paper. Before the situation is clear, those cunning international capitals will definitely not act rashly. Only when one of the opposition and the government has the upper hand is the best time to bet. However, despite the constraints of many negative factors, there are still a few figures in this airport. Most of them are journalists from the free world. Although they may have never heard of this isolated island, it does not prevent them from commenting on human rights, corruption and other issues on this island. However, the situation in the airport today is a bit abnormal. About 15 unfamiliar faces, dragging suitcases through the empty airport hall, look quite eye-catching. The burly figure, clean and neat steps, and the murderous aura between the eyebrows. Just from these points of view, the identity of this group of people is probably not simple. Future Security Company, this is their identity. The leader of the team was Chief Instructor Ivan, and the other 14 were employees with outstanding performance in the company. The airport staff also looked at this group of people who were obviously not easy to deal with, but no one came forward to question them. After confirming the documents according to the procedure, the airport staff let them go. The only 2 security guards at the airport were also issued pistols and sent to the streets to maintain stability. No matter what purpose these people came here for, the situation in this country could not be worse. At the entrance of the airport, there were 5 Santinas parked. The traffic in the Panu Islands is very bad. There is no subway, no bus, and even no taxis. To exaggerate, it was rare to see a car on the road in the past. After seeing the oriental face leaning against the door of the car, Ivan's old face squeezed out a smile. Hey, buddy, we meet again. Jiang Chen stretched out his right hand and laughed. Long time no see, boss, haha. Shaking Jiang Chen's right hand vigorously, the Slavic-faced veteran grinned. It's only been more than 4 months since we last met, and he has become darker. The whole person smelled of sand and the smell of gunpowder. Let's talk in the car. Jiang Chen waved his hand, motioning him and the soldiers behind him to get in the car. To be precise, they were all security guards of the future security company. As the situation in the Panu Islands continued to deteriorate, Jiang Chen took advantage of the situation and proposed to the Panu government to hire foreign security guards to deal with criminals rushing into his Panu industry. The reason didn't really matter. After following the local customs and giving the Panu authorities a sum of money, the visa was approved on the same day. 16 people in 5 cars. Although a bit crowded, there was still room. Led by Jiang Chen's car, the 5 cars formed a long line and drove towards Jiang Chen's trading company on Koro Island. How was your stay in Niger? Jiang Chen asked Ivan, the chief instructor, while holding the steering wheel. Not bad. These little guys have finally sharpened their claws. I remember that, when I first came here, I couldn't even hold a gun steadily, but now I have learned how to kill people. With a flash of pride on his face, Ivan lowered the car window, lit a cigarette, and grinned. Have you been to the battlefield? Jiang Chen asked with some surprise. Yes, I fought with the guerrillas. Ivan grinned after spitting out a puff of spicy smoke. Remember the Tuareg tribe? Of course, Roberts and I have also visited that tribe for a friendly visit. Jiang Chen shrugged and said, "Ack, camels, and unpalatable camel milk." This is his only impression of that poor and backward tribe. But they are not friendly. Ivan shook off the cigarette ash by the car window and continued. A month ago, they asked for benefits from us. US dollars, fresh water, bullets and so on, but I refused. At night, guerrillas disguised as Al-Qaeda came to collect money. Then what? Jiang Chen laughed. They left 20 bodies. Ivan grinned. I have to say, the rifle you provided, boss, is really a good thing. Even in a sandstorm, it never got stuck. And the penetration power is amazing. Of course, after all, it is a custom-made firearm. Jiang Chen said. At the same time, he silently added in his heart, after all, it is a light weapon from the future. Ivan shrugged and didn't continue the topic of weapons. He knew that his boss had a mysterious background, so he didn't ask too much. What about Niger? What did they say? Nothing. Their army is a bunch of softies. They don't dare to mess with those unruly people in the desert. The black guy named Bakary you hired went to the Minister of Commerce to report this matter. Although the Niger government said it would restrain the local armed forces in its territory, in the end they chose not to help either side and just sent a representative to mediate. If you offend us, you will offend the US dollar, and if you offend those unruly people, you will offend public security. Looking at the subtropical scenery passing by the window, Ivan squinted and said, what happened later? Did the Tuareg natives compromise? Obviously not. Ivan sneered, but later they learned to be smart and knew they couldn't win alone, so they pulled in the extremist organization with whom they had an ambiguous relationship. RPG, Toyota pickup truck, squad machine gun. But these are useless. In terms of firepower, we are not inferior to them. Are there any casualties? Of course. While speaking, Ivan kept squinting his eyes and looking into the distance. Casualties occurred, which was something Jiang Chen did not expect. Jiang Chen glanced at him, but did not blame him for the casualties. Although there was a reduction in personnel, a group of warriors who had experienced blood and fire were trained because of this. This can be regarded as a blessing in disguise. Where are the families of the fallen soldiers? Jiang Chen asked softly. In the base. After all, they lost their husbands. If they were driven away like this. Hearing Jiang Chen asking about the families of the fallen soldiers, Ivan was worried that he would be dissatisfied with his approach, so he hurriedly explained. No, you did a good job. Jiang Chen interrupted him. Ivan heaved a sigh of relief after hearing what Jiang Chen said. Although he looked down on those refugees who complained about their lives at the slightest movement at first, after so many months of training, it was absolutely impossible to say that no feelings had been developed. Moreover, they had fought side by side when facing the guerrillas' attack. To be honest, I was really worried, for example, that you would kick them out of the barracks. After all, considering the cost of business operations, they are indeed a burden. Ivan said with a wry smile. Don't get it wrong, Ivan. I never said that future security company is a company. Jiang Chen smiled, looked at Ivan, and continued seriously. We are the army. Chapter 283 starring trading company. Koro Island is located at the southernmost tip of the Panu Islands, and is the main island. To the northwest is the Philippines, to the southwest is New Guinea and Australia, and to the south is New Zealand. The country's only airport is located here. At the southernmost tip of the island is the country's only deep water port, built by Johnny International at a cost of millions of dollars. Generally speaking, such a large deep water port is surrounded by a circle of manufacturing factories. However, for the Panu Islands, where fisheries and planting are the mainstays of the economy, this common sense is obviously not applicable. Next to this deep water port, 3 warehouses stand alone. A brown-skinned local is holding a sugar cane and squatting by the outermost warehouse, looking at the door. His name is Kazan, and he is an aboriginal of the Panu Islands. Although he has a low level of education, he still does the job of a doorman. Every day, his job is to squat at the door of the warehouse and guard the phone, occasionally help when unloading is needed, and chew sugar cane when he is bored. Seeing 5 Santonas driving to the door and stopping, the young man looked at them enviously, immediately dropped the sugar cane in his hand, and went to meet them. Starring trading. This is my company here. After getting off the car, Jiang Chen introduced it to Ivan with a smile. Although it is now just a shell company with only 1 security guard and its business is completely managed. Starring? What a strange name. Looking at the big words on the big warehouse, Ivan asked casually. While chatting, the gatekeeper Kazan had already walked up to the 2 of them and said to Jiang Chen with a smile. Hey, boss, what brings you here? Jiang Chen arrived at the Panu Islands 2 days ago, but he has been busy with other things, so he hasn't come to the warehouse to see it. Seeing the boss in person, Kazan was also very surprised. Nothing, just help me open the door of the warehouse. Which warehouse? Warehouse number 3. Yes, yes. Kazan nodded and bowed in response, quickly took out the key, ran over and moved the iron door open. After sending Kazan to stay outside the door, Jiang Chen called Ivan and others into the warehouse and walked to a container in the corner. He opened the box and found a row of automatic rifles. They were not the Ripper rifles that Jiang Chen brought back from the apocalypse. These were the M-series assault rifles that were very common in the arms market, and they were all civilian models. Mission? Ivan said solemnly. Upon hearing this, the 14 people behind him also stood in a row at attention, waiting for Jiang Chen's instructions. Don't be nervous. There is still some time before the main event begins. The next mission is just a warm-up. Jiang Chen waved his hand, indicating that they don't need to be nervous. Clearing his throat, Jiang Chen pointed to the weapons in the box and continued. Considering the deteriorating situation in Panu, during this period of time, the security of this warehouse will be handed over to you. There are 15 gun licenses in the box. I applied for them through special channels from the Panu authorities. You can use them by writing your name. For those who try to break into the warehouse, the first time, a warning shot will be fired, and the second time, it is approved to shoot. Although the Liberal Party stated that it would try to avoid fighting near Jiang Chen's industry during the uprising, there is no guarantee that there will not be rioters who take advantage of the fire and try to break into the warehouse to make money. Yes. Ivan stood at attention in a sonorous and powerful voice. He had no objection to Jiang Chen's order, and the soldiers standing behind him did the same. Nodding, Jiang Chen was very satisfied with the momentum of the veteran. There are materials for building barracks in the warehouse. In short, the safety here is handed over to you. Leave it to us. Ivan grinned. After speaking, he turned around neatly, looked at his brothers, and shouted at the top of his voice. Do you understand the mission? Understood. 14 uniform replies exploded like thunder. Start working. Yes, sir. Seeing Jiang Chen coming out of the warehouse, Kazan walked over timidly. Boss, who are they? He had heard all the noises in the warehouse just now. I hired security guards. You don't need to worry about them. Just do what you should do. Don't stick your head out. Don't talk too much. You just need to remember these 2 points. Jiang Chen said casually. Swallowing his saliva, Kazan nodded desperately and responded with difficulty. Yeah. He just wanted to find an idle job to get by, but didn't want to get into any trouble. Just squatting at the door and chewing sugarcane in a daze every day, he could get a salary of $10, which was just like a dream. Knowing that this young man would not ask for trouble, Jiang Chen did not waste any more time on the issue of confidentiality. Give me the spare key to the warehouse. Kazan quickly took off a bunch of keys from his waist and handed them to Jiang Chen. You can leave work early today. Jiang Chen patted him on the shoulder and said after taking the keys. Yes. Kazan nodded and answered quickly. Kazan was very polite and did not ask anything. He picked up the unfinished sugarcane from the door and went home. Watching Kazan walk away, Jiang Chen turned and walked towards warehouse number 1. He opened the door, pulled open the iron door, and looked at the goods in the warehouse. A touch of joy appeared on his face. The entire 500 square meters of space was a bit crowded with all kinds of boxes. There were dairy products imported from Australian farms, vacuum-packed bacon, and various processed canned food shipped from Xinjiang Food Processing Factory. Fresh meats such as pork, beef and mutton filled a full 10 large freezers, and piles of rice in sacks, piled up like a small mountain. My goodness, judging from the average stacking height of 2 or 3 meters, this batch of food must be at least thousands of tons. Jiang Chen couldn't help but be amazed at the pile of food. Calculated at 1 kilogram of food per person per day, 1,000 tons of food can feed about 666,600 people for a month. The population of the 6th block did not exceed 50,000 at its peak, and the number of people in the Fishbone base was even smaller. Even if some people were recruited recently, there were only more than 1,000 people. Not to mention that the daily consumption for more than half a year was solved. Even for the problem of trade, this batch of food was more than enough. Fortunately, Jiang Chen went abroad now. If this batch of food disappeared in China, it would definitely cause problems. Without starting the transportation work immediately, Jiang Chen went out and opened warehouse number 2. Warehouse number 2 was filled with salt, which was also very scarce in the wasteland. The salt in Wanghai City in the wasteland was mainly produced by several survivor bases on the coast such as Liaoding Town, but the output was not high. Due to production conditions, the quality of salt was not very high. Hoarding salt is a crime in China, but it is not a problem in the turbulent Panu Islands. In addition to boxes of salt, there are also hundreds of bottles of beer, local subtropical fruits and dried fish. These materials are specially customized 3No products with no packaging printed on the surface. In other countries, such products may be difficult to pass customs, but in Panu, there are not so many troubles. Jiang Chen casually stuffed a few $100s into the customs and solved this problem. That was not a problem. After the quantity of materials was confirmed, the next step was to transport them back and forth. Looking at the piles of materials, Jiang Chen suddenly smiled bitterly. Fuck, there are so many. When will it take to move them in? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284 New Year. When Jiang Chen finished moving all the things in the 2 warehouses, it was almost night. Fortunately, the volume of the storage space has been expanded to more than 20 cubic meters. If it were based on the small capacity of 1 cubic meter of the jump bracelet, I'm afraid that he would not be able to move all the thousands of tons of supplies, even if he died of exhaustion. My god, did you rob the granary? Looking at the pile of boxes in the backyard, Sun Jiao was completely stunned. Although there was no shortage of food in the base, it was the first time she saw so much food. Do you still need to rob such a small amount of food? In our place, such a pile would cost more than $700,000. Seeing Sun Jiao's ignorant look, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile and said in a slightly smug tone, a lot of the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars was spent on logistics. The Panu Islands are surrounded by agricultural and animal husbandry countries, and the wholesale price of agricultural products from Australia and New Zealand is very cheap. But this is too much. Looking at the small mountain, Sun Jiao half opened and closed her mouth and said stupidly. Seeing Sun Jiao's red-dazed look on her face, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile knowingly and patted her waist. Okay, stop standing there like an idiot. Let's get someone to move the things into the granary. With a slightly red face, Sun Jiao seemed to realize her own gaffe, so she glared at him unhappily and turned to run to the community center outside the villa to find Wang King. Smiling at Sun Jiao's back as she ran away, Jiang Chen turned and looked at the dark sky in the distance. It was already February, and the heavy snow would almost stop after this month. In the wasteland, spring is the hunting season. Whether it was the aliens that had just ended their hibernation or the bandits who had been silent for a whole season, they were all waiting hungrily for the snow to melt and for the two-legged or four-legged prey to emerge from under the ruins. A lot of things really happened this winter. Shaking his head, Jiang Chen tightened his coat and walked into the villa. The 1,302 tons of supplies were not counted until noon the next day and were stored and classified. 300 tons of food were left in the base as reserves and for daily consumption. The remaining 1,002 tons were transported to the warehouse in the 6th block through the sewer. Part of it was sold locally and the other part was transported to the nearby cities of Susao and Hangzhou by the trade fleet formed by the Zhao group and exchanged for Asian crystals and other hard currencies. For a whole day, the base was immersed in the joy of the harvest. Although it was unknown how the food was transported into the base, it did not prevent the survivors in the base from showing joyful smiles at the full granary. Although not everyone is qualified to eat in the cafeteria, as long as they work hard, one day they will become upper-class citizens and enjoy unlimited rations. It was the new year. At Jiang Chen's impromptu idea, the survivors set up a row of snow-covered sheds in the square in front of the community center and held a New Year's Eve dinner meeting. Only tonight, no matter what their status is, as long as they are interested, anyone can apply for a stall, cook their favorite food, and share the food they made with others. The food in the granary is not limited, and the people in the base logistics department will be responsible for supplying food and fuel to the stalls that are out of stock in a timely manner. The only iron rule that needs to be followed is to eliminate waste. Take as much as you eat, and any behavior of discarding food will be severely punished by the base. However, it turns out that Jiang Chen was obviously overthinking to add this rule. How could those starving ghosts who have never seen the world be willing to waste? When they ate one by one, they almost wanted to burst their stomachs, and they only wished that their parents had given them to less mouths. Considering that there is no such thing as stomach strengthening and digestion promoting tablets in the base, Jiang Chen had to hold his forehead and make a supplementary clause. After thinking for a moment, no vomiting within 24 hours, otherwise eat it all back. This order did make those starving ghosts more relaxed, and they were more rational when enjoying the food. Eating alone is certainly not enough to satisfy the audience, so the survivors lit a bonfire in the center of the square and began an impromptu talent show. The songs may not be beautiful, and the dances may not be beautiful, but it is undoubtedly lively. People held hot bowls and sat in the center of the square, drinking hot soup and chewing barbecue, looking very happy. Although the radioactive dust above the sky is still oppressive and the pale snowflakes are still cold, the sparks rising above the bonfire dispersed the haze in people's hearts. Standing side by side with Sun Jiao on the roof of the community center, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile as he looked at the faces in the square that were filled with happy smiles. Are you very happy? Sun Jiao smiled as she looked at Jiang Chen's profile. Of course. Half a year ago, this place was just a half-collapsed villa area. Not to mention that it was sparsely populated, even zombies could not be seen. However, who would have thought that in just half a year, this place would be transformed into such a prosperous place? Looking at the smile on Jiang Chen's lips, Sun Jiao's cheeks flushed slightly, and a smile also appeared on the corners of her mouth. It was not because of the growth of the base, but simply because of the growth of the beloved in front of her. Half a year ago, she would not have thought that he, who was powerless, would grow up to be so outstanding today. Really, I don't know how much food I have to consume tonight. Although she complained, there was no expression of opposition on her face, just like a quarrel between lovers. Material conditions are basically met, and spiritual civilization construction is also very important. It is better to spend energy on outdoor sports than to drink and take drugs. Jiang Chen smiled. That's right. Looking at the lively atmosphere in the square, Sun Jiao's face showed a touch of nostalgia. What are you thinking about? It's a long time ago. Sun Jiao said with a nostalgic tone. In the days in the shelter, although we couldn't feel the change of seasonal temperature, every time this special day came, people would gather together to celebrate. I vaguely remember that every time this day came, my father would tell us stories about the ground. It was snowing there, people were setting off firecrackers, and eating delicious New Year's Eve dinners. Although when the shelter was opened, I realized that all this was fake. Everything was just a fairy tale. The shelter, which has been locked for years, is like an isolated island. While isolating radiation, it also isolates all electromagnetic wave signals and cannot receive any information from the outside world. However, people still believe that everything will be beautiful when the Iron Gate opens. After all, what stays in the eyes of these people is only the halo of the moment before the nuclear explosion, not the ruthlessness of the shockwave sweeping through the crowd. Do you think your father lied to you? Jiang Chen asked softly. I thought so before, but later I more or less understood it. Sun Jiao shook her head and stared at the bonfire not far away with a complicated expression. Humans are such fragile creatures. If we can't see hope, we can't survive. Chapter 285 Unexpected Visitor. Even though they knew that what awaited them the moment the door opened might be nothing but ruins. But if they didn't optimistically believe in that 1% possibility, they might not even have the courage to wait until the door opened. It's New Year's Day, let's not talk about such heavy topics. Jiang Chen said softly, holding her waist. Yeah. A blush rose, dispelling the solemnity between her brows, and Sun Jiao lowered her head embarrassedly. Speaking of which, what do you do during the new year in your place? In order to dispel the heavy atmosphere, she forced a change of subject. Usually I spend it with my family. When saying this, Jiang Chen was a little emotional. Unfortunately, he really didn't know what identity he should go home to visit. At least this year's New Year, I'm afraid there will be no chance to go back. Do you miss home? Sun Jiao noticed the strange color in Jiang Chen's eyes and asked with concern. I just went back a while ago. I can't say I miss it very much. My parents are in good health and live a good life. As long as they live well, I don't have anything to worry about. Is that so? It's great to have my family around. Sun Jiao muttered softly. Where's your sister? Jiang Chen's expression was a little embarrassed when talking about Sun Jiao, but he still insisted on saying it. She is not in very good health. What happened? Jiang Chen asked hurriedly. Linling, although Ting destroyed the chip that blocked her memory at the back of her brain, it also affected her lower limb nerves. In short, now she can only sit in a wheelchair. Sun Jiao said in a depressed mood. Jiang Chen's mood was a bit complicated. On the one hand, he was glad that it was not because of him that Sun Jiao sat in a wheelchair, and on the other hand, he felt sympathy for her sister. This is a rare opportunity. Take her out for a walk. Huh. But, Sun Jiao looked at Jiang Chen in surprise. Although the base knows that there is such an assassin who tried to assassinate me, no one knows who the assassin is, and no one has seen her face. It's better to stay with your family during the new year, if you still have family. After a pause, Jiang Chen looked at Sun Jiao's face and saw a comforting smile on her face, and then said, maybe taking her with you, walking in this happy atmosphere, will heal a lot of the trauma in your heart. Go quickly. Well. Sun Jiao buried her blushing cheeks, responded gratefully, and turned to walk downstairs. Watching Sun Jiao's back as she left, Jiang Chen moved his eyes to the square again. People were shouting and making noise. A young man plucked a guitar carved out of wood, playing an unknown but melodious tune. Family? Jiang Chen muttered to himself, and suddenly thought of a cute little girl. She no longer has any family. As he expected, Yao still stayed in her room. Instead of fiddling with computers and electronic devices as usual, She was sitting at the table, swinging her little feet that couldn't reach the ground, supporting her cute chin with both hands, and daydreaming. At this time of year in previous years, everyone would set off electronic fireworks to celebrate the New Year's Eve. But after waking up, everything has changed. If it weren't for meeting the big brother, Yao didn't dare to think about it any further. She liked it here very much, without having to face the cold wind and snow, nor the oppressive radioactive dust. But, it was a little too deserted. Are you thinking about something? Jiang Chen put his hand on her shoulder. Wow, the voice from behind scared Yao. After finding out it was Jiang Chen, Yao breathed a sigh of relief, puffed up her little mouth slightly, and said weakly, "Bullying small animals is not fun at all. Then how should we play?" Jiang Chen smiled as he stretched out his hand to rub the soft hair. "Well, that's all." Yao raised her head in enjoyment, revealing an expression as comfortable as a cat being scratched on the chin, and said softly, "Don't you need me to take you out to play?" Jiang Chen said softly, feeling the heat mixed with the fragrance of a young girl. "Go out to play?" Yao tilted her head and asked in confusion. "Well, they are celebrating the new year outside. There are performances and people are making New Year's Eve dinner. Don't you want to go out and take a look? You always stay in the room. Be careful not to get suffocated." Jiang Chen smiled. Hearing this, Yao lowered her head slightly. But, don't you need to accompany Sister Sun Jiao? Huh? Jiang Chen was stunned, not knowing why Yao suddenly said that. Every time Jiang Chen comes back, he goes to play with Sun Jiao. Yao puffed up her cheeks slightly, looked away as if she was upset, and said softly, "Although boys like bigger penises. But I also." Her mouth moved slightly, and because it was too embarrassing, Yao couldn't say the rest of the sentence. However, just when she was about to completely abandon her shame and speak out all her inner thoughts, her petite lips were blocked. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, her eyes widened in surprise, and then closed with peace of mind. The lips were as soft as candy and as sweet as honey. After a long time, Jiang Chen moved his lips away with two very different emotions, self-blame and reluctance. A silvery thread stained the pure and misty face with another level of temptation. Jiang Chen swallowed his saliva and gently put his hand on Yao's shoulder. Yao. As if she had sensed Jiang Chen's intention, Yao's pretty face bloomed with a soft smile. Okay. The pair of legs wrapped in white silk stopped shaking, nervously put together, and rubbed gently in a coy manner. Feeling the gradually charming atmosphere, Yao closed her lovely long eyelashes again, waiting for the long-awaited moment to come. Jiang Chen could no longer bear it. However, just when he was about to put aside all the guilt and be a beast again after a long time, the ep sounded again at an inopportune time. The charming atmosphere was instantly dispersed. Yao's face turned red like an apple, and she wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. At the gate of the base, Cheng Weiguo was wearing a coat and negotiating with a weirdo in a blue jumpsuit. Seeing Jiang Chen coming, his eyes lit up, and he hurried to greet him. "Boss, you are finally here." However, when he saw the unfriendly expression on Jiang Chen's face, he was stunned. Did I do something wrong?" "No, you did a good job," Jiang Chen said with a straight face. If it weren't for this call, he might have really done something beastly. Even Liu Yao couldn't stand it, let alone Yao, who had not been injected with genetic drugs and whose physical development was inhibited. So, Cheng Weiguo's call came at the right time. But for some reason, Jiang Chen still felt very unhappy. "But you don't worry, let's talk about business." "Okay." Cheng Weiguo nodded vigorously and then led Jiang Chen to the weirdo in a blue jumpsuit. "This outfit should be the uniform of the shelter." "This is the shelter," Cheng Weiguo coughed and prepared to explain. "Hello, leader of the Fishbone Base. Nice to meet you." The man cleared his throat and stretched out his right hand. "Jiang Chen, this is my name. For your outstanding contribution to rebuilding our homeland on this ruin, the Pan-Asian Cooperation Government will commend your work." Chapter 286 We need your help. Commendation? The brain was kicked by a donkey. Who is he? Jiang Chen ignored the guy named Jiang Chen and glanced at Cheng Weiguo. According to his words, he is from Shelter 027. Before the war, he seemed to be the director of the Merchants Bureau. Cheng Weiguo sighed, grinned teasingly, and then said, every once in a while, a shelter will be opened, and then a group of people who don't understand the situation will return to the surface. They are lucky, it's winter now. In winter, bandits and looters are basically hibernating. If the door of the shelter is opened in the spring, they will most likely be greeted by a group of fully armed robbers or slave traders. Did you say anything to him? No. Cheng Weiguo shook his head and said to Jiang Chen in a voice that the middle-aged man named Jiang Chen couldn't hear. You haven't given instructions on the policy of the shelter, so I immediately reported it to you. After listening to Cheng Weiguo's explanation, Jiang Chen nodded. Yes, you did a good job on this. Hearing the leader's praise, Cheng Weiguo chuckled. By the way, what was the policy of the 6th district on the shelter in the past? Jiang Chen asked casually. Generally, they didn't do anything. Those who received the nutritional supplement subsidy were taken into the slums. Some of the smart ones found a job in the mercenary group or hunting group, and they are still living well. While speaking, Cheng Weiguo's expression was a little embarrassed, which reminded him of his days in the shelter in the past. It happened that he was the one who didn't think quickly, and he took his wife to receive the subsidy together, and lost his freedom from then on. Jiang Chen nodded to show his understanding, and then looked at Jiang Chen, who had been ignored by him for a long time. Jiang Chen's disregard made Jiang Shen's face flash with a hint of anger, but thinking that he still needed help, he had to wait patiently for the two commoners to finish their whispering. My name is Jiang Chen, the leader of the Fishbone Base, and I'm also the marshal of the 6th Block military government and the governor of the Shengxiang town colony. Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows. Excuse me, there has only been one regime on this land from beginning to end, and that is the great and glorious Pan-Asian Cooperation. But they have already shot it into the sky. Cheng Weiguo interrupted teasingly, but Jiang Chen ignored him, and just looked at Jiang Chen. So, Jiang Chen said lightly, this practice of privately enclosing land and establishing oneself as king is stupid and illegal. Jiang Chen said righteously. Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows, but before he could say anything, Cheng Weiguo had already put the muzzle of the gun to the head of the stupid bureaucrat. Apologize, or I'll make a hole in your head. The incident happened so suddenly that Jiang Chen didn't react at all. His lips trembled, and he didn't know whether he was angry or scared, and he couldn't say a word. I told you to apologize, Blueskin. The soldier wearing the knight's medal sneered and hit him on the back of the knee with a butt of a rifle, knocking him to the ground. Insulting the leader in front of them was simply impatient to live. Jiang Chen did not stop his men's behavior, nor did he speak, but just looked at Jiang Shen's terrified eyes with amusement. At this moment, the sound of a loudspeaker broadcast came from not far from the gate of the base. Mob, stop your illegal behavior immediately, otherwise we will shoot. Wearing blue uniforms, standard bulletproof vests with the word PAC printed on their chests, carbon nano explosion proof helmets on their heads, and PK-2000 rifles in their hands. About 20 people crouched behind the bunker, pointing their guns at the gate of the base from a distance. Enemy attack. With the sound of an alarm, all the soldiers on duty returned to their combat positions. The heavy machine guns on the high concrete wall turned their gun heads together, and two remote-controlled sentry guns also moved with them. The soldier wearing a mechanical exoskeleton held a Ripper rifle and leaned against the bunker with his back to the black muzzle. The power armor stepped out of the bunker, facing the enemy with the front armor, and the triangular barrel of the gun turned with a humming sound. What is more terrifying is the hummingbird drones that gathered like locusts. There are hundreds of muzzles suspended in the air. Just looking at it makes people's scalp tingle. Crush. The 20 soldiers holding light weapons instantly seemed inadequate in front of the powerful firepower of Fishbone. A drop of cold sweat slid across the forehead of the pack soldier who led the group. Although he had considered the possibility of interference from illegal element, he had never thought that the firepower of the criminals would be so strong. Standing behind the power armor, Jiang Chen looked at the 20 pack soldiers behind the bunker indifferently. He had guessed that someone was squatting outside. This Jiang Chen is just an idiot who can only talk. Although it is safe in winter, it does not mean that it is safe enough to go around with a mouthful of official rhetoric. At least the zombies can't be frozen to death. and they will still rush over when they see living things at night. Thinking about it this way, there is only one possibility, that he has armed forces protecting him. I just don't know what kind of arrogance he has that makes him come up and knock on the door alone. Are you asking me about the legality? Looking at Jiang Chen kneeling on the ground, Jiang Chen slowly asked. Jiang Chen closed his mouth and dared not speak. Originally, he wanted to threaten Jiang Chen. This place has been surrounded by 20 fully armed pack security forces. Be smart and put down your weapons quickly to try to get leniency or something like that. However, when he saw the 5 ferocious power armors stepping out of the door aggressively with machine guns, he completely lost his temper. Here, I'm the law. Jiang Chen gestured to Cheng Weiguo to let go of Jiang Chen, then took out a pistol from his arms. Unfortunately, your excuse doesn't apply here. Jiang Chen put the muzzle of the gun against his forehead. No, don't kill me. I apologize. Jiang Chen trembled and spoke incoherently, his pupils constricted. Jiang Chen didn't look at him again, but looked at the soldiers behind the bunker in the distance. Silence lasted for a few seconds in the open space at the entrance of the base. A pack soldier finally put down his weapon, raised his hands above his head and stood up, then walked towards the entrance of the base. Knowing that he was no match for this group of mobs, the captain had to compromise in order to rescue the captured leader. We have no intention of provoking trouble. Please let Director Shi go. We also have no intention of provoking a dispute. It's just that your people are rude. Jiang Chen spread his hands, put away his pistol, and gestured to Cheng Weiguo, indicating that the soldier who raised the muzzle of the gun should put away his weapon. Seeing Jiang Chen's actions, the captain who had raised his hands above his head and walked to the gate of the base also breathed a sigh of relief and turned back to signal his comrades to put away their weapons. The tense atmosphere was resolved when both sides took a step back. After being searched, the captain walked in front of Jiang Chen. Looking at Jiang Chen who was lying on the ground nervously, the captain sighed and stretched out his hand to Jiang Chen. My name is Xian Feng, Pack Army Captain. Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen reported his name again indifferently, shook the man's hand, and then quickly let go. We are from Shelter 027. Director Shi should have negotiated with you about the specific situation. We have no hostility, but we just arrived on the surface. We are not very familiar with the situation here. Xian Feng said to Jiang Chen in a gentle tone. Then you should have seen, now that pack no longer exists. This includes CCCP and NATO. Really? Hearing this, Xian Feng sighed, as if accepting Jiang Chen's statement. However, Jiang Chen, who was lying on the ground, had a face as pale as the snow on the ground, and he seemed unable to accept this cruel reality. The Pan-Asian cooperation no longer existed, which meant that his position as director was meaningless. He could not accept this gap in status. Although it is hard to imagine, your weapons and equipment are very convincing. Xian Feng said in a deep voice. If PAC still existed, it would not allow such a strong armed force to exist in its own area. Before returning to the surface, they had guessed countless possibilities, including NATO or CCCP had occupied the entire PAC, or PAC won the final victory in the war, or nuclear weapons had completely turned the surface into a no man's land. They had considered this situation, but they did not expect it to really happen. I'm glad you recognize the reality. Jiang Chen shrugged. You should be glad that you met us, not a group of predators or a group of dirty mercenaries. So what's next? What are your plans? We need your help. Xian Feng said sincerely. Chapter 287 Nuclear Fusion Core. Help? We are not a charity. If it is a deal, we can talk about it. Jiang Chen smiled at Xian Feng who looked sincere. These survivors who just emerged from the shelter knew nothing about the rules of the wasteland, but they had a lot of pre-war supplies. Forget about help. Anyone who can restrain the impulse to rob these noobs in the wasteland can be called a good person. Xian Feng was stunned. He didn't expect Jiang Chen to say it so directly. After a brief pause, the captain spoke. We are also short of resources, otherwise the shelter would not have been unlocked in advance. Although we can't give you anything in return now, I promise that, if you lend a hand to our cause, we will never forget your help to us, after we rebuild order in this ruin. What cause? Jiang Chen asked in confusion. Of course, it is to restore the great Pan-Asian cooperation and restore the glory of Pan-Asia. As if he had regained his vitality, Jiang Chen, who was lying on the ground, climbed up and said passionately, "That's right." After looking at Director Shi beside him, Xianfeng looked at Jiang Chen and nodded. Before the shelter gate was locked, the last order we received was to wait for the shelter to open and rebuild civilization on this ruin. If Pac no longer exists, then we will restore it ourselves. Usually these blueskins will say the same thing when they just come out of the ground. Cheng Weiguo shrugged and said, "Blueskin?" Xianfeng frowned. "Nothing, just a name." Another soldier teased, "It's just a derogatory name for rookies by veterans." Without continuing on this topic, Xianfeng continued to look at Jiang Chen. "How about it? What do you think? Our interests should be the same. If we rebuild order, you can also return to a harmonious, stable, and peaceful life." Jiang Chen showed a playful expression on his face. "So what is your suggestion? Originally we just hoped that you could support us with some extra nuclear fusion cores, but after seeing your outstanding ability, I changed my mind. Now I sincerely invite you to join our cause." Xianfeng said seriously. Jiang Chen smiled and spread his hands. "You mean, we should train a master and then ride on our heads?" "How can you say that?" Jiang Chen plucked up the courage and retorted, "100 years ago, we stood up from the oppression of NATO and CCCP, joined hands and united together, and moved towards a great union. Have you forgotten the prosperity of the past? Do you yearn for this devastated ruin? Only we can lead Greater Asia to prosperity." Hearing this guy's nonsense, the soldiers holding rifles on the side laughed. Cheng Weiguo touched his nose and didn't laugh. After all, he also came out of a shelter. But from the corners of his mouth, he almost couldn't hold it back. Jiang Chen blushed, and the distrustful and teasing eyes made him very annoyed. If this was before the war, he swore that he would use the power in his hands to teach these unruly people a lesson. Unfortunately, the pain from the bruises on his legs reminded him that he could only hold it in now. Xianfeng remained silent, but there was still a hint of expectation in his eyes when he looked at Jiang Chen. Although most people are ignorant, if he is the leader of this group of people, he believes that Jiang Chen will have enough foresight. Jiang Chen slowly said, "Houses, weapons, high walls. Every brick and tile here were built by ourselves. We can do well with or without you. But under our leadership, you will do better bullshit." Looking at Xianfeng with a sullen face, Jiang Chen continued unceremoniously, "Wait until you have adjusted your attitude and shown enough sincerity, then come and discuss the deal with us. Or, you can try your luck at other survivor bases." Taking a deep breath, Xianfeng glanced at the dark power armor beside him. "I'll bring you back your answer. Don't take yourself too seriously, blue-skinned." Ma Zhangcheng, who was on duty with a rifle, teased. Xianfeng glanced at the man, said nothing, and tucked Jiang Chen away. The alarm was lifted, and the commotion at the gate did not affect the party in the base. It was only during the shift change that these soldiers on duty with empty stomachs briefly talked about the interesting things that happened at the gate of the base just now to the brothers, who had eaten so much that their stomachs were about to burst, and came to hand over their posts, and then they couldn't wait to rush to the lively square. "Boss, why are you talking nonsense with them? We can just kill them directly and take over the good things in their shelter." Following Jiang Chen to the office of the community center, Cheng Weiguo stood in front of the desk and asked Jiang Chen in confusion, "Oh, do you agree that I should directly occupy shelter number 027? Jiang Chen asked casually. "Even decent mercenaries will not miss this good opportunity," Cheng Weiguo replied. Nodding, Jiang Chen said nothing, just looked at the map on the table. This paper map was taken from the pre-war shelter manual. Although the 00X series and special shelters not open to the public were not marked, the regular shelters that accommodate ordinary residents were basically marked on the map. Shelter number 027 is located in the Sun Jiao area, not far from our base. The load capacity is 1,000 people, and the set closure period is 50 years, but it seems to be opened early. Finding the symbol on the map, Jiang Chen pinched his chin and muttered to himself. From what they said, it seems that they are very short of nuclear fusion cores. "What is that thing?" Jiang Chen asked. Not knowing why Jiang Chen asked this, Chen Weiguo looked at his boss strangely and said, "It is a large nuclear fusion battery with a diameter of 100 millimeters, stable and safe. Many pre-war industrial machines used it as a power source, as well as power armor. I remember that the 6th district also used it for a period of time, but just like the food on the supermarket shelves, these things were consumed very quickly, and there were not many that could be recycled. Anyway, after these nuclear fusion batteries were consumed, the power armor in the 6th district was converted to use subcrystals as a power source. Compared to the difficult to obtain nuclear fusion core, subcrystals are easier to obtain. Is that so? Generally speaking, are there any good things in the shelter?" Jiang Chen asked. "Good things produced before the war, obedient labor, technical talents, scientists." Chen Weiguo tapped the ep in his hand. "For example, these eps basically flowed out of the shelter. There are also some hot-selling drugs and even production tools." Jiang Chen nodded. "Last time from the 005 shelter, he got a batch of experimental equipment, a supercomputer that can be used as a virtual reality game server, and a production line for hummingbird drones. It must be said that for those survivors who wandered around the wasteland picking up garbage to survive, these shelters that were not invaded by radiation were really like treasures. In addition, there is food." Chen Weiguo added after a pause. "Food?" Jiang Chen asked with a little surprise. "That's right." Chen Weiguo nodded. "In addition to the frozen shelters, many shelters with living people will be equipped with breeding and planting facilities. After all, food has a shelf life. Even if it is stored at ultra-low temperatures in a vacuum, it is difficult to preserve food for more than 50 years without being attacked by nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, and with relatively advanced technical conditions. The shelter is indeed the most suitable place to produce food on this land. Although the CNC planting tower and soilless cultivation plant, both closed down, in the 6th block can also produce a small amount of crops, the yield and survival rate are very problematic. After all, the purification equipment that the survivors DIY by picking up garbage and recycling materials can never be compared with the precision instruments made before the war." "That's not right." Jiang Chen frowned. "Logically speaking, after so many years, many shelters in Wanhei City should have been opened. But why was there still no trace of food in the market in the 6th block until half a year ago?" Hearing this, a bitter smile flashed across Chen Weiguo's face. "It's mainly a problem of looters. Most shelters, after they were opened, could not escape the fate of being looted. And those robbers who only knew how to rob and kill, had no long-term thinking in their minds. When all the food was looted, all the people in the shelter were killed. We didn't know how to operate the instruments, so they were basically dismantled and sold as scrap metal. Without the purification facilities, it didn't take long for the environment in the shelter to become similar to the outside world. How many people would it take to attack the shelter?" Jiang Chen said in a deep voice. Chen Weiguo thought for a moment and replied, "It depends on the security of the shelter. But generally speaking, only a few dozen soldiers are needed to block the entrance of the shelter, and basically everyone in the shelter can be trapped inside. Encircle and kill." "That's right. Even nuclear weapons can't do anything to the shelter. In theory, as long as the door of the shelter is closed, people outside will never get in." Chen Weiguo said helplessly, "There is only one reason for the shelter to be opened early, that is, the energy or supplies in the shelter have run out. Just surround them, and they will definitely be the first to give up." Like a turtle. Nodding, Jiang Chen had a general understanding of the situation of the shelter in this wasteland. "I already understand the situation. You go down first." "Yes." Chen Weiguo stood at attention and saluted, then turned and left the office. Sitting at his desk, Jiang Chen leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and fell into deep thought. Shelter 027? Food? Jiang Chen was not very interested. The thing he lacked the least was food. What really interested him were the scientists and technical talents in the shelter. He was now faced with two choices: plunder or trade. Chapter 288 Cannibals and Blueskin. The New Year's Eve party lasted until 3 in the morning, and people who couldn't stand the fatigue returned to their beds and fell asleep with happy smiles. After living in the wasteland for so many years, this was the first time they were so happy. The bonfire had gone out, and the square was filled with the fragrance of barbecue. With the help of the participants, the people from the logistics department took back the cooking utensils to the canteen, and at the same time, transported the unused ingredients back to the warehouse for storage, and counted the ingredients consumed tonight. As the initiator of this New Year's Eve party, Jiang Chen regretted not being able to participate in this celebration. Although after finishing the conversation with Cheng Wei Go, he went straight back to the villa. At this time, there were still more than 3 hours before the curtain call of the party. When he returned to the villa, Yao had not fallen asleep. This cute and well-behaved little girl was sitting in front of the window, keeping watch alone, while holding her chin, and thinking about her worries. Staying up on New Year's Eve, few people will remember this tradition. Reuniting with relatives can only be said to be a luxury in this wasteland. Everything happened suddenly, whether it was the halo of the nuclear explosion or the orbital paratroopers that fell from the sky. People were still working, and schools were still in class. The Aegis system gave people only 10 minutes to prepare, rush to the nearest shelter, get into the temporary nuclear bunker, or be wiped out by the shock wave that swept across. The hibernation chamber is like a wormhole. For those who hide inside, the hatch falls and opens almost at the same moment. However, 20 years have passed outside the hatch. A crystal glittered across the corner of her eyes, and her tender little fingers moved slightly, but a warm big hand wiped away the tears from the corner of her eyes first. Do you miss home? Yeah. Yao bumped into Jiang Chen's chest, buried her little head tightly in his shoulder, and sobbed softly. I'm very strong. The voice was tainted with a hint of suppressed crying, but Jiang Chen could still hear the fragile strength. Yeah, Yao is very strong. I didn't cry. Yeah. Patting the delicate back gently, Jiang Chen cast his eyes on the clock on the wall. The hour hand happened to pass the 12 o'clock position. It seemed that at the same time, the breathing sound from his shoulder gradually became even. He stayed by Yao's side all night. Although he didn't do anything, the freight elevator slowly descended and led to the shelter under the surface. About 20 soldiers wearing PAC security force uniforms stood on it. All of them looked very lonely and embarrassed. Many of them had gunshot wounds, and spider-web-like bullet marks were embedded in their bulletproof vests, which was enough to show the fierceness of the battle just now. But fortunately, there was no loss of personnel. Jiang Chen huddled in the corner of the elevator. His eyes were a little erratic, as if he had been stimulated by something, and the whole person seemed to have lost his soul. At this moment, Captain Qian Feng, the captain of this team, was staring at the blood-stained lead pipe in his hand, the nuclear fusion core. As for the origin of this thing, it has to start from 3 hours ago. After being rejected by Jiang Chen, Qian Feng did not give up, but decided to try his luck elsewhere. The snow on the surface was heavy and cold, freezing the remaining body fluids in the shriveled bodies of the zombies. It must be said that they were really lucky. If it weren't for the snow, the violent zombies alone would have torn them all to pieces. Zombies at night, even the death claws, would be 3 points afraid. Factories, shops, hospitals. With this team of 20 people and an official responsible for appeasing the emotions of the victims, Qian Feng searched almost all the places where nuclear fusion cores might appear nearby. Unfortunately, he did not find that thing. In nearly 20 years, the survivors have plundered all the materials that can be used, which naturally includes the nuclear fusion core that can be used in the generator. Before using the more easily available subcrystals as an energy substitute, the nuclear fusion core was basically used by the survivors as the main energy material. But in the end, Qian Feng still got that thing. He spotted a flash of fire next to a half-collapsed building. About 20 to 30 survivors wrapped in cold weather clothing and unknown animal skins sat around a campfire, carrying crude rifles on their backs, cutting meat from unknown creatures and roasting them. In terms of firepower, this group of people was obviously much weaker than the survivors just now. Out of caution, Qian Feng did not approach rashly, but took out a loudspeaker to speak. It was this caution that saved their lives. The shouting did not last for a minute before the bullets from the opposite side poured over without any explanation. Many PAC soldiers did not understand the situation and were dizzy for a while, so they had to find shelter on the spot. They did not understand why those disaster victims would fire at them, and they did not know whether they should fight back. At this moment, in their minds, they were still soldiers of this country, and those people were just disaster victims who had lost their minds. Fortunately, Xianfeng, as the team leader, reacted quickly. After identifying the situation, he immediately issued an order to fire back at the mob and took the lead in firing the first shot. The weapons of this group of survivors were not as backward as they seemed. At the first moment of the exchange of fire, 2 light machine guns were set up out of the window. Although they were organized as a security force and all the people present had never been on the battlefield, they had received professional training after all. Whether in combat awareness or marksmanship, Xianfeng and others were far superior to this group of mobs. The squad shooter calmly cleared the firing point, and the rifleman crouched behind the concrete bunker and fired back alternately. Although inferior in firepower, they completely defeated this mob in terms of effective killing. The mob of armed attack troops was killed one after another. Xianfeng led his men to advance in an orderly manner, trying to force them to surrender. However, surprisingly, until the last man was killed, this group of people did not show any intention of surrendering. With his men, he attacked the den of this group of mobs, but Xianfeng saw a disgusting scene. Blood, meat. Those were not the corpses of some animals. No, strictly speaking, humans are also animals. This is not a mob at all. They are simply a group of devils. A group of devils chewing human flesh, as if nothing had happened. It's crazy. After seeing the shocking scene, Jiang Chen twitched the corners of his mouth and repeated this line. Xianfeng didn't say anything, but from the hesitation in his resolute eyes, it was not difficult to see the shock in his heart. No one vomited. There was a shortage of supplies in the shelter. They drank nutritional mixture before going out, and there was nothing in their stomachs to vomit. If it was a lone traveler who had seen the world, or a merchant passing by here, after seeing this scene, they might just say nonchalantly, "Oh, it turns out to be cannibals," and then start to loot the spoils. Looking at the fellow whose limbs were cut off and could not die due to the hemostatic agent, Xianfeng said nothing, silently raised the muzzle of the gun, and ended his pain. Under a corpse, he found a blood-stained nuclear fusion core. This nuclear fusion core was glued with a piece of thermite. It seemed that this group of people made this thing into a simple nuclear grenade. But obviously before he could use it, the unlucky guy was shot in the head. No matter what, the nuclear fusion core was obtained, the mission was completed, and the energy shortage problem of the shelter was alleviated. This should be a cause for celebration. But at this moment, no one showed even a trace of joy. Staring at the bloodstain on the nuclear fusion core, Xianfeng remained silent for a long time. Chapter 289 The Burden of Survival. 1,000 meters below the surface, there is a cave about the size of 2 basketball courts. As the elevator descended, the searchlights in the corners of the cave were turned on one after another, completely lighting up the underground space. The surrounding area was compacted soil and rock walls. Directly opposite the freight elevator was the gate of the 027 shelter. This was a fortress that could not be conquered at all. The only entrance and exit was blocked by a gear-shaped door panel that was 10 meters thick. The 8-meter thick compression alloy steel and the 2-meter thick lead interlayer were even enough to withstand a nuclear strike of 1,000,000 tons of tantalum equivalent within a short distance. Xianfeng walked to the door of the shelter, pressed his fingerprint, and opened the steel shell embedded in the door panel. He pulled out a data cable wrapped in soft lead material and plugged it into the EP on his wrist. The door panel, that even gamma rays could not pass through, naturally could not pass any electromagnetic waves. The information exchange between the shelter and the outside world depends entirely on this data cable. The EP screen flickered, and soon a woman's face appeared. Although she is just a woman, the 3 stars on her collar make her ability not to be underestimated. Han Junhe, 2016, Army Colonel. She was thawed 3 years ago and took over the position of the deceased 027 shelter director according to procedures. She is currently the director. How is the situation? After saluting, Xianfeng reported in a deep voice. The mission has been completed. Well, come in. Nodding, Han Junhe signaled the staff to open the door of the shelter. The gear-shaped door panel slowly moved away, revealing the narrow hole behind. A suspended metal bridge, pulled by a mechanical cantilever, formed a passage leading to the shelter. Passing the suspension bridge, 20 soldiers placed their rifles and ammunition on the weapon rack and then walked into the disinfection room. The staff waiting on the side pushed the weapon rack forward and transported it to a special location for disinfection. Without entering the disinfection room immediately, Xian Feng walked in front of Han Junhe and handed over the nuclear fusion core in his hand. Blood. Yes, blood. Glancing at the bullet marks on his bulletproof vest, Han Junhe said seriously, "Is the war not over yet?" She subconsciously thought that he was attacked by NATO soldiers on the surface. Hearing this, a weak smile rarely appeared on his resolute face. "It's over, but you will never believe what I saw outside." Han Junhe glanced at the blood on the nuclear fusion core again, as if he understood something. "Come to the conference room in half an hour." "Yes." Xian Feng stood at attention, saluted the girl who was more than 20 years younger than him, and watched her leave. The lights were on in the conference room, but the atmosphere was a little depressing. Pushing open the door of the conference room, seeing 4 pairs of eyes sweeping over at the same time, Xian Feng swallowed his saliva, walked to the conference table with his head held high, and pulled out a chair to sit down. Han Junhe, director of the shelter, Wu Yaguo, a resident representative, Qin Zuhei, an academician of the Pan-Asian Academy of Social Sciences, Feng Hui, a senior engineer of the shelter technology, and Jiang Chen, who was still trembling. On the conference table was the bloody nuclear fusion core. "Briefly tell us what you saw and heard outside, otherwise we can't start our conversation." Academician Qin, with grey hair, smiled gently and said to Xian Feng. Xian Feng looked at Han Junhe and saw her nod. Then he spoke. "This is what happened." At the request of Academician Qin, Xian Feng briefly described everything he had seen after leaving the shelter, including the nuclear winter and zombies on the surface, including the powerful firepower of the fishbone base and its indifference to the pack regime, including the exchange of fire with the cannibals. When Xian Feng finished explaining all this, the conference table fell into silence again. After a long time, Han Junhe, the director, broke the silence. "Feng Hui, how long can this nuclear fusion core last?" "Maintaining the current power restrictions, it should last for half a year." Feng Hui gave a conservative estimate. "The current power restrictions? Lasting for half a year? That's impossible." Wu Yaguo protested immediately. "All the equipment in the shelter depends on electricity, whether it is the production of food or the operation of the water purification device. Maintaining the current power restrictions means that each person can only be allocated 600 milliliters of drinking water per day, receive 1 hour of ultraviolet radiation, and can only eat the stored nutritional mixture for 3 meals. This means that you can't take a shower, can't fill your stomach, and your spirit is depressed. You will be in a sub-healthy state for a whole 6 months. In extraordinary times, nothing is impossible." Han Junhe said briefly, then looked at Feng Hui. "Maintain the current power restrictions. You go first." "Yes." After hesitating for a moment, Feng Hui still got up and walked out of the meeting room with the nuclear fusion core. "You can't ignore public opinion." Wu Yaguo stared at Han Junhe. "I don't know what this damn procedure means. The old director managed everything in order until you woke up. Everything changed." Han Junhe was indifferent to Wu Yaguo's accusations. "You can't blame Xiaohe. She has done a good job." Academician Qin persuaded Wu Yaguo in a soothing tone, trying to keep Wu Yaguo calm. "Very good." Wu Yaguo sneered. "It's only been 3 short years since you took over. Everything has changed. First, the farm output was reduced, and the nutritional mixture was mixed with organic food. Then the water was supplied in batches, and now the power restriction measures? It's pure nonsense. I just refer to the current supplies of the base, and make the most practical choice." Han Junhe's voice was very cold, without a trace of emotion. "Most realistic? I only know that the shelter was designed to last 50 years. It was calculated by a supercomputer. But how many years have passed? In less than 20 years, the shelter has been forced to open ahead of schedule. I don't know what stupid things you, as a leader, have done in the past 3 years." Wu Yaguo said angrily. Quietly waiting for Wu Yaguo to vent his anger, Han Junhe spoke slowly. 1,000 people, 50 years of shelter. Tell me, how many people are there in the shelter now? Wu Yaguo was speechless, and an angry expression froze on his face. I tell you, there are 1,743 people in total. Seeing that Wu Yaguo did not speak, Han Junhua continued. The first thing I did, after waking up from the hibernation chamber, was to check the work log of the previous director of the shelter. But guess what I saw? What? The first one, in 2171, I couldn't refuse a mother's plea, and took the baby from her hands. What's wrong with that? Wu Yaguo said disapprovingly. That baby was the 1001st person taken in by the shelter. Did the 027 shelter open nearly 30 years earlier, just because of this baby? Wu Yaguo sneered. Or did you really have no excuse, and had to use that innocent baby as an excuse for your incompetence? This is just the beginning. Han Junhua said lightly. In 2172, I held a wedding for a couple. I know it's wrong to do so, but I still sincerely wish them happiness. There is nothing wrong with this. Don't you think that in this desperate environment, a wedding is so inspiring? So, in these 16 years, you have held more than 400 weddings of all sizes? Han Junhua glanced at the 4 people at the conference table. Xian Feng, who couldn't get a word in, stared at Ep in a daze, and Jiang Chen was still shaking there. Wu Yaguo, who was not satisfied with Han Junhua's explanation, remained indifferent, while Academician Qin sighed and lowered his head. There is no energy conservation plan, no family planning. Supercomputers can calculate energy consumption with an accuracy of tens of floating points, and can calculate a nearly perfect population structure and growth curve, but they still cannot calculate your IQ. In the end, the calm voice was finally tinged with anger. Although the volume was not loud, it stung the eardrums of everyone present. Academician Qin opened his mouth, wanting to say something to ease the tense atmosphere at the conference table, but in the end he said nothing, just looking at Han Junhua quietly. Wu Yaguo's face flushed with anger, but he could not find a reason to refute. Including my early awakening, I'm very surprised. Han Junhua saw that no one answered, and continued. According to the plan, I should have been awakened after 25 years of closure of the shelter, and took over the position of director. But what did the old director do? He actually committed suicide out of fear of crime. Old Zhang died of myocardial infarction. Wu Yaguo tried to refute, but his tone was no longer as strong as before. Myocardial infarction? With the medical conditions in the shelter, do you think a mere myocardial infarction can kill someone? Hiding the condition and giving up treatment is suicide, Han Junhua said firmly, looking directly into Wu Yaguo's eyes. Wu Yaguo's Adam's apple slid, and he couldn't say a word. If it were you, what would you do? Academician Qin suddenly said. In 2171, I would refuse to accept the baby. Before 2180, no newborns will be born. After 2180, according to the population growth curve analyzed by the supercomputer, the number of newborns will be strictly controlled. Han Junhua said without hesitation. But you know what? Director Zhang was facing not only a baby, but also human nature. Academician Qin said softly, I witnessed the tragedy that happened at the door that day. The people outside the door begged hard, hoping that Xiao Zhang would show some leniency. According to the rules, the shelter can only accommodate 1,000 people, and Xiao Zhang did abide by the rules. He didn't. Han Junhua said. Hearing the little girl's words, Academician Qin just smiled kindly and then recalled. Some people knelt down, some cursed, and some even tried to force their way in. I remember it was Xiao Zhang who fired the gun. You can't imagine the scene at that time, a husband trying to take his son through the gates to join his wife. It was Xiao Zhang who fired the gun. Wu Yaguo closed his eyes, as if he remembered something very far away. Xian Feng still stared at his shoelaces, but his expression was somewhat moved. He was on duty at the door that day. However, Han Junhua remained indifferent, and just said lightly, why can you refuse a group of people, but not a child? Maybe, this is because of human nature. Academician Qin sighed and said. So, stupid things were committed from the beginning. Han Junhua said. Without experiencing it, everything that happened that day was just a piece of text to you. It is indeed understandable that you would have such an idea. Academician Qin just sighed and said with understanding for her indifference. You woman, do you still have humanity? Wu Yaguo said in disbelief. Without looking at Wu Yaguo, Han Junhua said indifferently. Humanity? That's just a burden to survival. Chapter 290 Choice. The debate lasted until the morning. But it didn't matter. There was no concept of day and night in the shelter. The topic of discussion had evolved from the merits and demerits of the shelter directed to what to do next, which was a great progress. Energy. Without energy, there is no way to survive. The water purifier will stop, the organic farm will stop working, the ultraviolet light will go out, and even the air filter and the vent will stop working. It only takes 10 minutes from a complete power outage to the collapse of the shelter. Perhaps stimulated by the quarrel on the conference table, Jiang Chen, who had been shivering in his chair, suddenly stood up and slammed the table and shouted angrily, "War. Only war can solve all problems. We should declare war on the natives on the ground. Don't they have the nuclear fusion core in their hands? We can just snatch it from them." This mob not only illegally enclosed the land, but also armed resistance. They also rebelled against them. We should teach them a lesson, and teach them the etiquette and reserve that civilized people should have. The glory of Pac will live forever. The angry roar drowned out all the sounds on the conference table for a while. Wu Yaguo, who was interrupted, looked over blankly. Han Junhua, who had been indifferent, just glanced at him. Even Xianfeng, who had been staring at the ground, raised his head and looked at him strangely. Jiang Chen's Adam's apple moved, and his hands on the table shook like epilepsy. After a moment, he sat back stiffly. Ahem. Wu Yaguo coughed lightly. Jiang Chen, why don't you go back and rest first? Jiang Chen looked at him gratefully, then stood up stiffly and limped out of the meeting room. Seeing the door closed, Wu Yaguo slowly spoke. This time his tone was much softer, and there was no longer a quarrelsome tone. This angry resident, although it is just an emotional expression, it also provides us with ideas for future development, right? We can completely solve the energy crisis by means of foreign wars. It is impossible to win. Xianfeng suddenly raised his head. Having seen the strength of that group of people with his own eyes, he thought he needed to remind the decision makers, heavy machine guns, drones, sentry guns, and even power armor. Our security forces are only wartime police, not the frontal troops fighting with NATO, and are not equipped with heavy firepower equipment at all. Damn it, you are training with taxpayers' money, can't you suppress a group of mobs? Wu Yaguo couldn't help cursing. But that group of mobs is not a mob. What's more, training can't make up for the gap in equipment. Xianfeng said helplessly. What about those man-eating beasts? Didn't you win? Wu Yaguo questioned. Xianfeng smiled, but that smile was a bit bitter. For a soldier, the most painful thing is to explain the war to people who have not participated in the war. There are different sizes of armed forces on the surface. Some are as powerful as the fishbone base, while others are just scattered soldiers. They fight on their own. Then just pick the ones you can beat. Wu Yaguo said impatiently. It's illegal to plunder from the victims, from the survivors. Legal? Ha. Those people are lawbreakers. They have committed murder, robbery, and insulting corpses. Aren't you a security force? Don't you think they don't deserve to die? Xianfeng didn't speak. His mind was a little confused. Of course, he thought those devils deserved to die and should be sentenced to the most severe capital punishment. But they were only wartime police, not judges, and had no right to decide the ownership of the property of lawbreakers. Picking up the nuclear fusion core from the corpse and taking it to the shelter for use was a serious violation of discipline. A robber who robs robbers is also a robber in legal terms. But he did not refute Wu Yaguo's point of view. If the pack no longer exists, what is the point of enforcing the laws of the pack? Including the military rank on his collar, what is the point? What do you think? As the director of the shelter, are you just going to do nothing? Wu Yaguo looked at Han Junhua. Han Junhua glanced at Wu Yaguo and spoke slowly. Stupid. Wu Yaguo's face turned pale and his teeth clattered, but he laughed instead of getting angry. Stupid? Are you stupid for doing nothing, or am I stupid for being a resident representative and considering the entire shelter? Of course it's you. You. Wu Yaguo supported himself on the table and stood up. However, Han Junhua did not give him any face. I don't know what the old director had in mind to make such a stupid decision to elect resident representatives from the residents. To understand public opinion. This is a shelter, not a resort. Okay, Zahra, calm down and stop talking like that. Since you have an idea, why don't you explain it properly? Academician Kin sighed. Because there is no need for that. The people have narrow horizons. Hearing Han Junhua's statement, Academician Kin smiled bitterly and turned to look at Wu Yaguo. Can I tell you a story? Go ahead. Although he was angry, he still respected the old man. A poor man and a rich man lived in the same community. Because the police maintained order, the two lived in peace. But suddenly one day, the order that had always existed disappeared overnight. So what will happen next? Wu Yaguo swallowed his saliva and began to realize the seriousness of the problem. Now we should not consider who to snatch the nuclear fusion core from, but how to ensure that we will not be plundered by the survivors on the surface. The shelter is facing more than one trouble. Academician Kin sighed. These things will only increase unnecessary panic if they spread among ordinary residents. Han Junhua glanced at Academician Kin. But if you don't say anything, the residents will also feel panic. Academician Kin smiled kindly. Han Junhua didn't say anything and fell into deep thought. With his eyes swaying, Wu Yaguo said with difficulty, then, before they reach out, plunder enough nuclear fusion cores and close the door of the shelter. As long as we don't open the door we can't hide forever. After a pause, Academician Kin continued. There is no essential difference between being closed for 20 years and 50 years. It will only make the gap between us and the survivors on the surface bigger and bigger. Then what do you think we should do? Wu Yaguo shouted in collapse. Since the shelter has been opened in advance, the environment on the surface is not so bad that we can't survive. We should return to the surface, establish contact with the survivors on the surface, and even rebuild our home surface. What's there? There are only a group of primitive people who eat raw meat and drink blood. Even if they can use gunpowder and master technology, they are still primitive people. The dirty environment, suffocating radioactive dust, disgusting mutant creatures. I don't think we should leave the shelter. There are warm beds, clean water, and fresh food here. There is no need for us to leave here at all. Wu Yaguo retorted. Ignoring Wu Yaguo, Han Junhua looked at Academician Kin. The fishbone base has already obtained intelligence about our energy shortage. If nothing unexpected happens, they should have been discussing how to attack us. Do you have any good ideas? This was the first time she used a tone of seeking opinions. Then start a discussion with them, or a deal. A deal can only be established when the conditions of both parties are equal. And they have already grasped our weaknesses. If they can easily force us to surrender, there is no reason for them to choose a deal. Han Junhua said in a deep voice. As long as the weakness no longer exists, it will be fine. Academician Kin lowered his head. Really? Han Junhua also fell into deep thought. What are you talking about? Looking at the riddle between the two, Wu Yaguo couldn't help but say. However, no one responded to him. Because some things will only increase unnecessary panic if they spread. The silence lasted for a long time, and Han Junhua suddenly opened his mouth and announced, let's adjourn the meeting. Xianfeng, who had been unable to sit still for a long time, breathed a sigh of relief and left the meeting room first. Wu Yaguo twitched his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end he said nothing and turned away. Standing up tremblingly, Academician Kin stopped beside Han Junhua and sighed. Have you made up your mind? Yes. Hearing the affirmative answer, Academician Kin nodded and left the meeting room. It seemed that in an instant, the originally noisy meeting room became deserted, and only Han Junhua was left. Humanity? After a long time, she slowly uttered this meaningless words. Chewing on this sentence repeatedly, Han Junhua shook his head, stood up and walked out the door. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, The Past of the Refuge. The next morning, a ray of sunlight passed through the window eaves and sprinkled on the soft and smooth cheeks, which looked very cute. Jiang Chen looked out the window after his eyes stayed on Yao's peaceful sleeping face for a moment. The snow had stopped. Speaking of which, the weather had been clearing up more and more recently. After staying in bed for a while, Jiang Chen slowly moved. As if she felt that Jiang Chen was about to get up, Yao smacked her lips, tightened her little hands around Jiang Chen's neck, and pressed her whole body against him. Although the temperature in the room was very warm, Yao's body temperature was still very low in the morning due to anemia. Naturally, her body hugged the heat source next to her. After a while, Jiang Chen finally moved away the clinging little arm without waking Yao up, and then got out of bed quietly. After covering the little girl with the quilt, Jiang Chen leaned over and kissed her smooth forehead gently, then turned and left. Last night, Sun Jiao pushed the wheelchair and took Sun Jiao out for a return in the square. Perhaps it was the lively and joyful atmosphere in the square that reminded her of the time she lived with her sister and parents in the 071 shelter. After a long time, Sun Jiao finally heard the light whisper, "Sister." All the past things came flooding back like a tide. She hugged her in her arms and cried bitterly, tears overflowing from Sun Jiao's eyes. The word sister made her feel that all the suffering she had endured in the past 10 years was worth it. Hugging her sister, Sun Jiao slept in for a long time. What woke her up in the morning was the knock on the bedroom door. Rubbing her sleepy eyes and getting up from the bed, Sun Jiao yawned, got out of bed, and walked forward to open the door. "Good morning." "Morning." Seeing Sun Jiao's defenseless pajamas, Jiang Chen felt his nose slightly hot and couldn't help looking away. Come to think of it, why didn't I see you doing morning exercises today? I was lazy. She stretched lazily, and the thin tulle collar was stretched open by the fullness. Listening to the sound of swallowing saliva with satisfaction, Sun Jiao raised the corners of her mouth proudly. Knowing to stop while she was ahead, Sun Jiao stopped teasing Jiang Chen and rarely put on a serious expression. "Thank you for yesterday." "Why thank me? I didn't do anything." "Is she feeling better?" "Much better. She called me sister yesterday. In the evening, we talked about our childhood for a long time." "Thank you, I really appreciate it." Because she was too excited, Sun Jiao was a little incoherent for a while. Jiang Chen was sincerely happy for her that the two sisters could recognize each other. The sequelae left by the memory blockade have been solved, and the only problem left is the paralysis of the lower limbs. Although the medical conditions in the fishbone base and the 6th block are not yet sufficient to complete the brain tissue repair surgery, Jiang Chen believes that as the technology buried under the ruins is gradually excavated, Sun Jiao will be able to get rid of the wheelchair one day. "Don't thank me, it was you who awakened the memory in her heart." Before he finished speaking, he was blocked by the soft red lips parted. With crystal mist swaying in her eyes, Sun Jiao smiled and jumped back to the bedroom door, with her hands on the door. "I'll go back and change clothes first, and have breakfast together later." In the end, Jiang Chen did not have breakfast with Sun Jiao. After leaving a note on the table saying, "Come to the community center office to find me," Jiang Chen hurriedly left the villa and went to the cafeteria. After ordering a bowl of millet porridge and 2 meat buns, Jiang Chen sat with the survivors in a friendly manner, chatting about yesterday's party while finishing breakfast. Although he was happy for Sun Jiao to find her true personality, he didn't know how to face her or what expression he should face her with. After all, he did that to her in the basement. After placing the dishes on the food collection cart, Jiang Chen went straight to his office in the community center, only to see Sun Jiao waiting there. "Why don't you eat with me? I want to formally introduce my sister to you." Sun Jiao smiled as she lifted her long hair from her ears. I don't know how to face her yet," Jiang Chen said awkwardly. "Are you going to avoid her for the rest of your life?" "She's my sister." With one hand on her waist, Sun Jiao closed the distance between her and Jiang Chen and said coquettishly, "Don't be like that. Let's talk about business." Jiang Chen coughed lightly and looked aside. Sun Jiao bit her lip with a complicated look on her face. She wanted to say something, but she finally sighed and didn't say it. Seeing that Sun Jiao did not continue to dwell on this issue, Jiang Chen breathed a sigh of relief, sorted out his thoughts, and talked about what happened at the gate of the base yesterday. After hearing Jiang Chen's words, Sun Jiao was stunned and fell silent. What are you going to do? After a while, Sun Jiao suddenly asked. If the 027 shelter falls into the hands of a predator gang or a dishonest mercenary organization, it will undoubtedly be a waste of natural resources. While speaking, Jiang Chen looked at Sun Jiao. Seeing Jiang Chen looking at her, knowing that he was considering her feelings, Sun Jiao smiled considerately and said softly, "You don't have to explain to me. Indeed, the reason why I was separated from my family was because the shelter was attacked by bandits. But after walking in the wasteland for so many years, I have long understood that plundering is just a normal behavior." It was based on this idea that she tied Jiang Chen to a chair when she first met him. Even in Wanghei City, she is already considered a relatively decent lone traveler. After a pause, a gentle look appeared on that handsome face. "Moreover, I believe you. If it were you, even if you occupied the shelter, you would definitely make a completely different choice from those bandits." Hearing Sun Jiao's words of trust, Jiang Chen's face rarely showed an embarrassed look, and he couldn't help but shift his eyes to the side. "Yesterday, I talked to Cheng Weiguo. It is basically impossible to attack the shelter by frontal assault. I want to hear your opinion. The time cost required for siege is too expensive. If it is only for 10 days or half a month, it is okay, but if it is for a year or two, not to mention that Jiang Chen does not have the patience to wait when the situation west of Zufeng Highway is not clear. The Fishbone base cannot keep its troops in Songjiang for a long time to surround the 027 shelter. Generally speaking, siege is the best choice. Since the shelter was opened ahead of time, it proves that they are already facing the problem of shortage of supplies. The first one to fail must be the shelter." Sun Jiao said without hesitation. "That would take too much time. Is it possible to force the door open from the outside?" Jiang Chen said in a deep voice. Sun Jiao shook her head. "Is that so?" Jiang Chen frowned in some difficulty. Suddenly, he looked at Sun Jiao as if he had thought of something. He hesitated for a moment out of concern, but he still asked the question. "Speaking of which, the shelter you used to live in was called Shelter 071, right?" "Yes. Is there any problem?" Sun Jiao asked. "Excuse me, do you remember how Shelter 071 fell?" Sun Jiao was stunned. "Sorry, if it reminds you of bad things, forget it." "No, it's okay." Seeing Jiang Chen's concerned look, Sun Jiao smiled and waved her hand. "It's just that I was less than 10 years old at that time, and my memory is a little fuzzy. I'll try my best to recall it. Please." Jiang Chen nodded solemnly. Taking a deep breath, Sun Jiao looked out the window, as if immersed in Shelter 071. Chapter 292 Determination. The iron boots crushed the snow foam, and the steel shells of the two T3 power armors reflected the thin sunlight. Following closely behind were 20 knights wearing mechanical exoskeletons, and 100 citizens wearing carbon nano bulletproof vests. Each of them held a Ripper rifle, and marched in a loose square formation. At the end of the queue was a Jagdtiger, the ferocious electromagnetic gun barrel, mounted on the back of a square-headed pickup truck, emitted a cold and chilling light under the cold light of winter. Looking around, the streets on both sides of the highway were dead silent, and no aliens could be seen. The dull-headed zombies were buried in the snow, standing at the door of the dilapidated store, with drool frozen into ice chips at the corners of their mouths. Occasionally, a zombie would walk to the middle of the road, and would be knocked down by the butt of a gun by a passing soldier. Wanghei City is very safe in winter, although winter is about to pass. Walking in the front row of the queue in power armor, Jiang Chen recalled the conversation with Sun Jiao before departure. "It's cheating." "Cheating?" Jiang Chen asked doubtfully. Sun Jiao nodded and continued. "After the shelter was opened, the director organized us to build simple tents on the ground, and organized technicians to survey the air and soil quality, and sent an advance team to investigate the situation around the shelter. If the surface is habitable, we will end the shelter plan ahead of schedule, and start reconstruction on the ruins. If the situation is too bad, we will return to the shelter after collecting enough nuclear fusion cores, and wait for the situation to improve." It was probably the third day after the shelter was opened, and a ragged beggar came to the camp on the surface. I remember that everyone was very happy at the time, because there were still survivors on the surface. From him, we learned a lot of useful information. For example, the World United Organization announced its dissolution, the colony ship was launched, etc. Although some of the news was very frustrating, it was not desperate. Gradually, he gained our trust. One day, he suddenly told us that the nuclear fusion cores we collected could be exchanged for food in nearby survivor settlements. This is very comforting news. After all, for a shelter, as long as there is enough energy, it is easy to produce food. The director gave him 5 bags of rice and ordered 2 pack soldiers to escort him. However, we never expected that when he came back, he was followed by a group of bandits holding rifles. The 2 pack soldiers were gone, and the 2 sets of Azure security uniforms were crookedly put on the 2 bandits. The camp was in chaos, and everyone was unprepared. The director led the security forces to hastily attack, but they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers and firepower. A fire broke out in the camp, and it seemed that the bandits were still burning. It was at that time that I was separated from my family. I ran a long way, ran out of the camp, ran out of that street. Sun Jiao did not continue here. She had already told what happened later. She did not dare to go home, wandered aimlessly among the ruins, and finally met a female soldier who claimed to be a pleb, and then wandered alone. Was it a deception? But I always feel that the real reason for the destruction of the 071 shelter can be attributed to the pampered people's reserved attitude towards human nature. While thinking about it, Jiang Chen could already vaguely see the square. The iron fence fell to the side of the street, and the sign of Shelter 027 was inserted crookedly on the concrete road. The bones were piled up with the cement debris on the street corner, and they were faintly visible under the snow. In the center of the square was a freight elevator leading to the underground. On the elevator, there was a figure standing. Jiang Chen squinted at the figure and paused, raising his hand to signal to stop the march. The pack uniform and the ponytail fluttering in the wind were all he could see from a distance. As if noticing Jiang Chen, the man walked towards him steadily. Chen Weiguo, who was standing next to Jiang Chen, was also wearing a power armor. When he saw the man coming, he raised the muzzle of his gun. The man paused, but did not stop moving forward. Jiang Chen reached out and put his hand on Chen Weiguo's gun and shook his head. Chen Weiguo understood and put away his weapon. It was a woman, but there was a bit of masculinity on her heroic face. Her ponytail fluttered in the wind, and with her indifferent eyes, her temperament was somewhat similar to Sun Jiao. The only difference was that Jiang Chen could not see any timidity from her. Jiang Chen grinned playfully, not understanding where her courage to come alone came from. Could it be that she was like Jiang Chen, the director of the Merchants Bureau, who could not figure out the situation on the ground? The woman stopped about 2 meters in front of Jiang Chen. Captain of the army, Han Junhe. Jiang Chen, although you may already know. The voice came from the metal shell, dragging a dull echo. Opening the mask on the power armor helmet during a conversation is a basic etiquette to show friendship. However, Jiang Chen did not open the mask. After all, he was not here to make friends. Yes. Are you standing here waiting for me? Yes, then you should also know why I came. Looking down at Han Junhe, Jiang Chen smiled and said, yes. Is that all you can do? Jiang Chen said helplessly. Is that the Type 50 electromagnetic gun? Glancing at the truck behind Jiang Chen, Han Junhe suddenly asked about an irrelevant topic. Although he didn't know why she asked that, it was not something worth hiding, so Jiang Chen nodded calmly. Yes. A 40-ton 3-axle truck chassis equipped with a Type 50 electromagnetic gun, completely sacrificing armor to increase firepower. Yes. How is it? Are you sure you can win? Jiang Chen said in a relaxed tone. Han Junhe shook his head. Even though he knew he could win, there was still no fear on his face. Jiang Chen couldn't understand his calmness. Your technology levels are uneven. Although you have inherited pre-war technology in some areas, there is no so-called scientific research system. Am I right? Han Junhe pointed out the flaws of the fishbone base. Is there any problem with this? Jiang Chen said softly. We have advanced technology and a complete scientific research system, and these are what you lack. Han Junhe said. So we are here. Jiang Chen did not deny Han Junhe's statement and said concisely. We can make a deal. Han Junhe said. The deal is based on equal strength. Jiang Chen smiled. No, to be precise, it should be based on the situation, where both parties have concerns. Han Jianhua shook his head and said, then do you think I have concerns? Jiang Chen asked. Han Jianhua did not speak, but reached into his pocket and took out a pistol. This pistol alone was not enough to threaten Jiang Chen, who was wearing a power armor, but the soldiers around him still raised their weapons and pointed their guns at her. As long as she dared to point the gun at their leader, they would pull the trigger and shoot her into a sieve. Jiang Chen also did not speak, nor did he stop the soldier's behavior. He just squinted and stared at her eyes. He could not see any hesitation in those eyes. She raised the gun and pointed it at his temple. Everyone was stunned, including Jiang Chen, who was standing in front of her. Before leaving the shelter, I used the authority of the shelter director to deploy the last command at the shelter terminal. After 24 hours, if my life signal cannot be detected in the shelter, the gate will be completely locked for 50 years. At the same time, the gates between the residential areas and the functional areas will be temporarily locked, and the main control system will release excessive gas to 2 of the residential areas through the ventilation facilities, killing 925 residents. Jiang Chen's pupils shrank, staring at this crazy woman in disbelief. Without any reaction to Jiang Chen's gaze, Han Jianhua continued to speak, as if he was just reciting a prayer, with no ripples in his calm tone. The bodies of 925 residents will enter the organic conversion furnace and be converted into organic matter, water, and energy. To maintain the minimum life activity needs, the shelter will take the remaining 818 people to 50 years later. If you are willing to wait, see you in 50 years. You lunatic. Jiang Chen stared at Han Jianhua's eyes, trying to find the fear of death in her pupils. However, except for a cold indifference to life, he could not see any color. This is the worst choice. Han Jianhua opened the safety. Even if you surrender to me, I will not do anything to you. You will live a good life, and you don't have to make this choice. He was telling the truth. He really didn't abuse anyone. Even the slaves in the fishbone base lived with dignity. But no one can guarantee this. In 1 minute, I will pull the trigger. Han Jianhua closed his eyes. The atmosphere froze instantly. The silence between the two of them lasted for half a minute. In the last few seconds, the mask opened with a swoosh. Jiang Chen sighed and looked at Han Jianhua and said, okay, let's talk about the deal. Chapter 293 Safe Distance. 10 figures stood on the spacious freight elevator. What is this? Han Jianhua asked, pinching the small green crystal with his fingers. Subcrystal, with the help of a special energy extraction device, can be used as a substitute for the nuclear fusion core. Staring at the wall flying outside the elevator, Jiang Chen answered in a relaxed tone. It's hard to imagine how much energy such a small thing can store. Staring at the reflection on the green crystal surface, Han Jianhua muttered to himself. Jiang Chen glanced at her and didn't answer. Behind him were 8 soldiers wearing mechanical exoskeletons, carefully guarding against possible dangers. But Jiang Chen's expression seemed very relaxed. Just 10 minutes ago, he reached an agreement with Han Jianhua. Originally, he thought that this inhumane girl would ask for a lot of benefits from him, but it turned out that he was overthinking. Although this agreement was proposed by her, it was much more beneficial to the fishbone base. The content of the agreement is as follows. First, the door of the 027 shelter is permanently opened, nominally surrendering to the fishbone base. Shelter 027 promised to only maintain the current size of the security forces and no longer expand its armaments. Fishbone base will also stop invading and keep a safe distance from Shelter 027. The two sides will engage in trade, with Fishbone base responsible for providing the energy and other materials needed to operate the shelter, while the shelter will exist completely as a scientific research institution and provide technical support to Fishbone base. At the same time, Fishbone base will be responsible for building a camp on the surface directly above the shelter to accommodate the excess residents in the shelter. The shelter has a high degree of autonomy over the camp, and the defense of the camp is entirely borne by Fishbone base. In addition, Jiang Chen will send an envoy and several staff members to Shelter 027 to be responsible for liaison and communication, and to register the required materials. At the same time, Shelter 027 will also send an envoy to Fishbone Base to conduct a long-term assessment of the human rights situation in Fishbone Base. After establishing sufficient trust, Shelter 027 will gradually be incorporated into Fishbone Base. In fact, it doesn't matter if it is not incorporated. This treaty has already declared that Shelter 027 will become a vassal of Fishbone Base. A vassal that keeps a safe distance from the master. A slight feeling of overweight came from the soles of my feet, and the elevator was almost at the bottom. I don't understand. This agreement seems to be very disadvantageous to you? Jiang Chen asked casually as he looked at the light that was gradually opening up underground. It is basically equivalent to completely surrendering to Fishbone Base. The only difference from being completely occupied is that the soldiers of Fishbone Base are not allowed to enter the shelter. But if the only exit of the shelter is controlled, it doesn't make much difference whether to enter or not. The original intention of establishing the shelter was to preserve the fire of civilization, wait for environmental conditions to improve, and establish a colony on the ruins. It is not to return to the surface and establish hegemony over the heads of the unfortunate. If Fishbone Base can replace Shelter 027 to perform its mission, and is indeed more capable of completing this mission than Shelter 027, then it is not impossible for Shelter 027 to be incorporated into Fishbone Base. Of course, the premise is that they can keep their promises and guarantee the personal freedom and life safety of the residents in the shelter. And this trust can only be built with time. Your words are a bit special. That's not what Jiang Chen told me. Jiang Chen said with a smile. It was my mistake to send him to the surface. Han Junhe admitted frankly. If the image of Pak has collapsed in the hearts of the survivors, it is a bit ridiculous to send a senior official of Pak as a lobbyist. But this can't be blamed on her. Who would have thought that this war would end like this? The elevator was stable. Jiang Chen signaled the soldiers to stay there and walk to the gear-shaped door panel with Han Junhe. When they arrived at the door of the shelter, Han Junhe pulled a data cable from the door panel and plugged it into his EP. How is the negotiation going? Xian Feng asked nervously. It's going well. Open the door. Hearing Han Junhe's instructions, Xian Feng breathed a sigh of relief and waved to the staff in the control room to start the door of the shelter. Dust was raised, and the gear-shaped door slowly rolled sideways, revealing the walkway behind. The suspension bridge was pulled by the mechanical arm to form a road, connecting the entrance and the interior of the shelter. It's hard to imagine that there is such a space 1,000 meters below the surface. Do you want to go in and take a look? Han Junhe asked casually. Although he was very interested in visiting, Jiang Chen still shook his head. No, just at the door. Are you kidding? If I go in, who knows if you will suddenly turn against me and hold me hostage? Your concerns are also our concerns. Oh, what do you mean? Jiang Chen looked at Han Junhe with interest. You dare not come in, just like we dare not let you in, right? Han Junhe said in a flat tone. Hearing this, Jiang Chen was stunned for a moment and then burst into laughter. The soldiers standing behind him were a little confused. They didn't understand why the leader suddenly laughed. Several Pak soldiers who were waiting in the shelter were also confused, and they looked nervously at Jiang Chen who was standing next to Han Junhe. You are a very interesting person. Jiang Chen shrugged and grinned. It's really unexpected. Even I think I'm a boring person. Han Junhe said this and walked into the shelter. He didn't wait at the door for long. Soon Han Junhe came out with 2 drafted agreements. After just a quick glance, Jiang Chen signed his name on the 2 agreements. Each party held a copy, and the agreement officially took effect on the date of signing. Jiang Chen noticed that when signing this surrender letter, the middle-aged man standing behind Han Junhe looked at him with suspicion and hatred. However, Jiang Chen did not say anything about this, but just smiled indifferently, and then put away his own contract. Before boarding the elevator back to the surface, Jiang Chen turned and looked at Han Junhe who sent him to the elevator. The representative of the Fishbone Base will arrive tomorrow, and the first batch of supplies will arrive the day after tomorrow. I hope you won't suddenly close the door after taking the sub-crystals, otherwise I might get angry and blow up this cave. Jiang Chen said in a joking tone. We will keep our promise. Please don't use such a threatening joke to test our already fragile trust relationship. Han Junhe said. Haha, don't think too much, it's just a joke. Of course I believe you will keep your promise, Jiang Chen said with a smile, and at the same time boarded the elevator and pressed the start button on the control panel. See you later. Bye. Watching the elevator rise, Han Junhua turned and walked towards the shelter. On the way back to the office, she could feel that the eyes shot at her from all directions were full of suspicion and distrust. This was understandable. After all, a few minutes ago, she sold the shelter to the man named Jiang Chen. Sitting on the chair, facing the deserted room, she suddenly sighed. From today on, all residents in the shelter can return to the surface, enjoy unlimited ultraviolet radiation, and breathe free air. Except for her, choosing to use herself as a deterrent, which is equivalent to giving up the opportunity to return to the surface, at least before building enough trust. Suddenly I feel so tired. Han Junhua slowly lay on the table and took a long-awaited nap. Chapter 294 Camp 27. 027 was removed and replaced by the sign of Camp 27. People in blue shelter uniforms returned to the surface with the elevator. When they saw the thin sunlight, they cheered, cried, ran on the street, and knelt down to kiss the concrete. The soldiers of the fishbone base stood in groups of 3 or 5, chatting to kill time, and looking at these lunatics jokingly. Are these guys crazy? Looking at the cheering blueskins from a distance, Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows in surprise. It's just that we waited too long, Chen Weiguo said with a cigarette in his mouth and grinned. After the initial excitement, the residents soon settled down. Under the coordination of the manager sent by Shelter 027, the 100 advanced team residents quickly gathered in the center of the square and unloaded the construction materials transported to the surface from the freight elevator. It was a metal plate. This thing is amazing. It seems to be a memory metal. I saw a blueskin driving a small engineering vehicle, holding a 50 square meter rectangular metal plate, and throwing it to the ground. The blueskin waiting next to him came forward and tore off the plastic film on the outside. After a while of contact with the air, Jiang Chen saw that the more than 50 square meter metal plate had several cracks in the middle, and it moved like a transformer, automatically forming an iron house with doors and windows. Jiang Chen's eyes almost popped out of his head. This thing is simply amazing. Seeing that Chen Weiguo and the others did not show any surprise on their faces, I think this kind of thing should not be a rare thing before the war. However, even if there is no surprise, there is no doubt that envy. No wonder these predators are keen on robbing these blueskins. There are too many good things. Although he did not go up to rob, Jiang Chen still pulled the manager who was directing the construction of the camp and asked directly how much of this thing was left in the shelter. The manager could not understand what Jiang Chen meant and immediately showed a helpless expression on his face. There are not many of these things in the shelter, only these 100 sets. Only 100 sets? Jiang Chen asked unwillingly. What about the production process? You should have the drawings or something. It was not something worth hiding. The manager nodded. Yes, but it is very troublesome to produce this thing. It is no exaggeration to say that before the war, the cost of producing such a plate-shaped mobile house was enough to build 4 better houses directly on the ground. The only advantage of this thing is that it does not take up space. If it is not for putting it in the shelter, there is no need to produce this thing at all. After all, the cost of building a shelter is as high as 1 million yuan per square meter. In a shelter, where every inch of land is valuable, piling up building materials that take up space is even more expensive. Hearing this, Jiang Chen no longer paid attention to this thing, but he still secretly made a note of the existence of such a thing. Although he can't use this thing now, who can say what will happen in the future? For example, aerospace. This thing still has a wide range of applications. In less than half an hour, 2 small engineering vehicles had already run back and forth on the square for several laps, and 100 small iron houses were neatly located on the square. The residents of the shelter carried large and small bags and moved into the iron houses according to their numbers. 80 of the iron houses were occupied by the residents of the shelter, and the other 20 were controlled by the garrison of the fishbone base. After a while, 3 trucks drove into the square under the escort of a dozen soldiers. The 3 trucks were full of building materials and construction workers transported from the fishbone base. It is not enough to just build a house. For the safety of the camp, a wall is also indispensable. Most of these workers from the Fishbone base were residents recruited from Shengxiang town. After nearly 3 months of labor, they have almost upgraded from slaves to lower class citizens, and some of those who have made outstanding contributions have even been upgraded to middle class citizens. The workers on the car stopped in the open space in front of the camp and jumped off in twas and threes. After unloading the goods, the cement truck and related construction equipment were skillfully set up, and then under the command of the engineer, the foundation was dug outside the square. According to the plan, the Fishbone base will build a 4-kilometer long wall outside the square. The semi-collapsed small shops nearby will be directly demolished, and the more intact buildings will be incorporated into the camp for use. The camp was busy and the clanging sound continued until the night. Many frozen zombies were attracted by the breath of the living and dragged their languid steps towards the camp. However, the soldiers of the Fishbone base were well prepared. The soldiers stationed at the street entrance raised their rifles and fired 2 shots from a distance to kill the scattered zombies. There are not many zombies active in this generation, or because the low temperature suppresses the reproduction of zombies in the city center until summer. There is no dense group of zombies in the suburbs of Wanghai City. The construction of the camp is in full swing, but compared with the activity on the surface, the underground shelter is much quieter. Han Junhua sat at the table, facing the angry Wu Yaguo with an indifferent expression. What have you done? I have no objection to asking them to help us build a camp, but what does it mean to station troops there? Do you want us to become their slaves? In my opinion, this is the best outcome, Han Junhua said indifferently. Each side took what it needed and feared the same unbearable consequences, so both sides exercised restraint. Are you stupid? Since they need our help, we can use the technology in our hands to ask for more benefits from the natives. Han Junhua only felt funny when she heard Wu Yaguo's questioning, but for some reason, she couldn't laugh. Do you know what they brought when they came? What? Wu Yaguo said disapprovingly. A huge army? So what? Even if we can't defeat them, we just need to close the door and they can't get in. Unless they don't want the technology in our hands, they will have to sit down and talk to us. Han Junhua shook his head. They already know about our energy shortage. Or it's not a secret at all, and the threat is not valid at all. Then we will force them to die. Wu Yaguo said viciously. If the door is never opened, they will get nothing. Have you heard of gambling? Han Junhua asked. Wu Yaguo raised his eyebrows, not knowing why. Seeing that he didn't speak, Han Junhua continued. 2 gamblers are sitting at the gambling table. Both of them are eyeing each other's chips. The rules of the game are very simple. 2 guns are held in the hands of 2 people, but the muzzles are pointed at the same person. A uses a gun to force B to hand over the chips, and B points a gun at himself to threaten A. The gambling game revolves around B's life and death. If B dies, A will get nothing. This rule is not fair at all. Wu Yaguo sneered. The rules are never fair to the weak, Han Junhua said lightly, and it happened that a few hours ago, Jiang Chen and I both held the gun. It's just that at the beginning of the gambling game, I pointed the gun at my head. The grimness made Wu Yaguo hold his breath. Chapter 295. Jet is not addicted. Jiang Chen directly asked Wang Qing, the head of the logistics department, to select the ambassador stationed in shelter 027. The main task of this ambassador is to record the needs of the shelter and convey Jiang Chen's instructions on the research direction of the shelter, which is almost the responsibility of the logistics department. However, in addition to this basic task, Jiang Chen also gave the ambassador another task, which is to monitor the energy usage and output of the shelter, to prevent it from hoarding energy. The next morning, the ambassador came to Camp 27 with a freight truck carrying building materials. The ambassador is a woman named Zulu, 25 years old, from the night class. Before the war, she worked as a salesperson in an insurance company. During the war, she entered a dormant chamber. After waking up, she drifted to the slums of the 6th block. She was one of the first survivors brought by the Fishbone base. She has a very likable appearance, good eloquence, and is very careful. She is also very qualified, and is indeed very suitable for the position of ambassador. The other 5 staff members are upper-class citizens in the base, and will enter the shelter on a rotating basis, to assist Zulu in her work. Be careful when you stay in the shelter, walk around more, and build good relationships with the residents of the shelter. You represent the image of the fishbone base. Jiang Chen patted her shoulder and urged her. Boss, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Zulu said to Jiang Chen with a smile, saluting playfully. Jiang Chen nodded and watched her get on the elevator. As the signal light flashed, the 6 people disappeared on the surface and led to the underground buried thousands of meters below. At the same time, a young-looking woman wearing a blue shelter uniform walked towards Jiang Chen. Hello, Mr. Jiang. My name is Zhang Yazhu, and I'm responsible for serving as the ambassador of Shelter 027 to the Fishbone Base. The voice of this girl, who looked not very old, was very pleasant and fluent, and the only flaw was that she was a little awkward and nervous. Coincidentally, the envoys sent by both sides were women. Was it out of consideration to ease diplomatic rhetoric? After all, there would be no professional diplomats in the wasteland. It was really an interesting phenomenon. Jiang Chen shook his head to dispel the strange thoughts in his mind. Looking up and down at the messenger, Jiang Chen smiled and said, speaking of which, how old are you? 20 years old. Zhang Yazhu was stunned for a moment, not understanding why Jiang Chen asked this question, but still answered truthfully. 20? Speaking of which, how many years has this shelter been closed? Jiang Chen said. As of July this year, it has been exactly 20 years. Zhang Yazhu said. 20 years. 20 years old. Were you born in the first year of the shelter's opening? Jiang Chen smiled. No, my father told me that I was born outside the shelter, but I was only a few months old when I entered the door. Zhang Yazhu smiled shyly and said. Is that so? Speaking of which, your father is not worried at all about working so far away from home? Hearing this, Zhang Yazhu shook his head. He's passed away. I'm sorry. Nothing. He passed away peacefully, and everyone in the shelter said he was a very good person. It's just, he always said he was sorry for everyone. Although I don't understand why my father said that. If I can help everyone on his behalf, it will definitely make him feel better when he is watching me from heaven. At the end, Zhang Yazhu's face showed a shy and bright smile. Well, you will. Looking at that smile, Jiang Chen also smiled and encouraged the little girl. It's really a heartwarming story. Even in a shelter without sunlight, can such a beautiful soul be nurtured? After sending the little girl to the truck back to the base, Jiang Chen was about to return to the Fishbone Soldier Station, but happened to catch a glimpse of a sparse circle of people gathered outside another gate of the camp. Seeing that there seemed to be a commotion there, Jiang Chen walked over. Listen guys, just a small piece like this, everyone can become a sharpshooter. This is the good stuff I brought from Liuling Town, 100% pure. Don't you want to try it? I promise, it feels great. A businessman dressed in suspicious clothes was speaking with spit flying, selling suspicious drugs to several fishbone soldiers, who were in charge of guarding the door. Behind him was a two-headed bull, and the bulging bag on its back was full of strange small commodities. What's the use of this thing? Walking behind the crowd, Jiang Chen looked at the businessman and said with interest. Hearing Jiang Chen's voice, these deserting soldiers were almost scared to death. No one listened to the businessman's nonsense anymore, and these soldiers dispersed and returned to their posts. Seeing that all the customers had run away, the businessman looked at Jiang Chen with a complaint, stuffed the small bottle into the cloth bag on the back of the two-headed bull, and pulled the rope to leave. His intuition told him that the identity of this person who could scare away these guys with guns should be not low. Although Jiang Chen ruined his business, he didn't dare to complain. After all, merchants like them were doing business with their heads on their waists. It would be a tragedy to be slammed because of offending someone with words. What is this? You haven't answered me yet. Seeing that he was about to leave, Jiang Chen asked again. Jet, a good thing that improves the senses. The specific effect is that after eating it, the whole world seems to slow down. Seeing that Jiang Chen seemed to want to buy, the merchant stopped and skillfully promoted it. Is it similar to the effect of bullet time? That's really a good thing. Jiang Chen touched his chin with interest. How is it? Only 10 subcrystals per piece. Seeing the interested expression on Jiang Chen's face, the merchant urged. This thing is sold for 4 subcrystals per piece in the 6th district. I've seen it. After hearing this, the soldier not far from Jiang Chen was worried that his boss was cheated, so he couldn't help but remind him. The merchant's eyes widened. Can the thing in the 6th district compare with mine? The jet I sell is not addictive. You should try eating more of the one they sell. You are kidding. There is a jet that is not addictive? Another soldier laughed and complained. When he heard that this thing was addictive, Jiang Chen immediately lost interest. But looking at the merchant arguing with the soldier, Jiang Chen immediately came up with another idea. Ahem, you mean that your jet is improved and better than the one sold in the pharmacy in the 6th district? It is not addictive? Jiang Chen cleared his throat and interrupted the argument between the two. That's right. The businessman straightened his collar proudly and looked at Jiang Chen. I guarantee with my life that my jet will not be addictive, no matter how much I use it. But, very good. Jiang Chen nodded and praised. How many pills do you have? Only 53 pills. The businessman said. What's your name? Jiang Chen asked. Menkian. Okay Menkian, here are 530 points of subcrystals. Take them. Jiang Chen reached into his pocket, took out a few larger subcrystals from the storage space, and threw them into his hand. Hey, thank you, boss. Nodding and bowing, Menkian took the subcrystals and happily offered the small bottle of medicine with both hands. However, Jiang Chen's next words made Menkian's heart fall into an ice cave in an instant. You're welcome. Jiang Chen casually threw the medicine to the soldier next to him, then pointed at the merchant who was packing up the Asian crystal. Detain him and let him finish this bottle of medicine. Report to me if there is no problem. After saying that, Jiang Chen turned around and went back to the camp without caring how the man begged for mercy. Chapter 296 Lake Mall. It turned out that the guy was just a liar. Those drugs were not even jet, but a weird thing. After taking 2 pills, the guy fell to the ground unconscious. This was obviously not jet. Jet would not pass out after taking 2 pills. Thinking of the black-hearted businessman trying to sell them this thing, the soldiers were furious. They searched the guy for the crystals and threw him at the entrance of the camp. The scattered crystals were divided among the soldiers, but the 530-point block of crystals was paid by Jiang Chen, so they didn't dare to take it. The captain thought for a while and finally took the crystals back to Jiang Chen in person and reported the fake medicine merchant truthfully. The first time he saw the merchant, Jiang Chen knew that the goods were not good, so he was not surprised at all by the news reported by the captain. At the beginning, he paid for the bottle of medicine purely to kill time and tease the blind liar. As for the 530 subcrystals, Jiang Chen did not want them. He waved his hand and asked the captain to take them back and share them with the soldiers on duty. The wall was not built yet, and it was hard to stand in the snow with guns in hand. Each person could get at least 5 points of these 530 subcrystals. For them who had enough food and clothes, but little money in their pockets, it was a lot of wealth. Seeing the grateful captain running out of the door excitedly, Jiang Chen smiled, locked the door of the barracks, and lay down on the bed to go to sleep. At this point, he thought this episode was over, but who would have thought that it was not over yet. The next morning, under the bus stop outside the square, a trembling figure stood in the cold wind. The man looked at the end of the street from time to time, occasionally rolled up his sleeves to look at the watch, and his eyebrows squeezed together from time to time, as if he was anxiously waiting for something. It was like this for a while. On this lonely street, his behavior seemed very strange. The soldiers on duty at the entrance of the camp looked at the strange guy from a distance and pointed at him. After a while, Jiang Chen walked over slowly, accompanied by 2 soldiers wearing mechanical exoskeletons. When he got closer, he found that the guy was Menkian who sold medicine to him yesterday. Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows in surprise and walked to his side. What are you doing? Do you even need to ask? Waiting for the bus? Menkian said disapprovingly, glancing at Jiang Chen who was standing next to him. Bus? Jiang Chen looked at him with interest. Yes, it seems to be late. Menkian cursed angrily, but then sighed as if giving up, tightened his collar, and prepared to leave. Wait, where is your cow? Seeing that he was about to leave, Jiang Chen stopped him and asked. Cow? What are you talking about? Turning back, Menkian looked at Jiang Chen with a weird look. frowning and asked back. That look was as if he was looking at a lunatic. Is he pretending to be stupid, or is he really stupid? Jiang Chen's expression also became a little strange. His intuition told him that this guy's reaction was probably related to the medicine he took yesterday. Where are you going? Jiang Chen asked. To work. The man said impatiently. To work. Jiang Chen was stunned and looked at him with the look of a psychopath. Yes, do you have any questions? Damn, it's already this late. Menkai rolled up his sleeves and glanced at him, then cursed and ignored Jiang Chen and walked quickly to the other end of the street. The soldier standing behind Jiang Chen raised his gun and was about to call the man, but was stopped by Jiang Chen. Looking at Menkai who was walking away thoughtfully, Jiang Chen ordered the two soldiers. You two follow first, I'll follow. Yes. The two soldiers stood at attention and saluted, and immediately trotted over with their rifles. Back at the camp, Jiang Chen greeted Cheng Weiguo, then put on his T3 power armor, and chased after him. The two people who were in charge of following Menkai were knights from the Fishbone base. They had been implanted with the honor chip, which was just a different name. The two-dimensional coordinates would be displayed as green dots on the EP map. After importing the map information into the holographic screen in the power armor helmet, Jiang Chen chased the two green dots at full speed. The snow on the road was very thick. Jiang Chen originally planned to start the sliding mode to chase them, but the sliding wheels under his feet slipped severely, so he had to run over. After wasting some time on the road, when Jiang Chen arrived at the destination, he saw that the two soldiers were already waiting there. Where are they? Jiang Chen asked, slowing down and walking in front of the two people. They went in. We were afraid of alerting the enemy, so we didn't follow them in. A soldier pointed to the other side of the street. Jiang Chen narrowed his eyes and looked over. It was a small shopping mall about 3 stories high. The sign with the words Lake Mall was drooping twistedly on the roof. From the wreckage of the car at the door, it can be seen that this place should have had good business before the war. Many of the windows in the mall were nailed shut with wooden boards or other materials, and those that were not sealed were covered tightly with curtains. Only the glass door downstairs of the mall was left open. While blocking all possibilities of spying from the outside, there is no obstacle at the main entrance to the building. No matter how you look at it, this building is suspicious. Looking at the dark entrance, Jiang Chen frowned and turned on the radio life detection device mounted on the power armor. Ripples swept across the map on the holographic screen, but when the cursor swept across the building, it did not return a single ripple. From this point of view alone, there seemed to be no human activity in this mall. Jiang Chen was not too surprised by this, but was more convinced that there must be something fishy here. Although this thing is very useful in the present world with a lower level of technology, it is not so useful in the end times. Many survivor settlements, mercenary groups or predators who are slightly smarter will set up life signal shielding devices at home to prevent their coordinates from being detected by people with ulterior motives. The guy named Menkai just went in. How could there be no one here? How long has he been in there? Jiang Chen asked in a deep voice. The older soldier raised his hand and looked at the EP. 10 minutes. Jiang Chen pondered for a moment. Strange hallucination drugs, and the merchant who suddenly appeared at the entrance of the camp. Is it a coincidence? But this is too coincidental. Camp 27 has only been established for 2 days, and the wall has not even been built halfway. At this time, a merchant suddenly passed by here. It is not sure whether this group of people are friendly to ordinary survivors. Just walk over and sell goods to the sentry with a gun at the entrance? No matter how you think about it, it is a bit unreasonable. If a soldier buys his drugs, will he have hallucinations and then walk here? Thinking of this, Jiang Chen's face showed a solemn look, but then his expression relaxed again. If he came for the Fishbone base, he would not be unrecognizable even to him, the marshal. However, from the words and deeds of the merchant, it seems that he does not recognize him. From this point of view, he should not come for the Fishbone base. Then he should come for the 027 shelter. Jiang Chen's eyes gradually lit up, and the clues in his mind gradually became clear. The other party learned about the opening of shelter 027 through some means. For some purpose, they tried to abduct the residents of the shelter. But the businessmen obviously didn't know the specific content of the plan. He was just instructed to sell such drugs there, so he didn't care whether the other party was a blueskin. This made sense. As for what the other party's purpose was, I'm afraid we can only know it after entering. Looking at the dark door and several windows covered with cloth, Jiang Chen immediately had an idea in his mind. Chapter 297. How could it be him? It was obviously unwise to enter from the front, but Jiang Chen had no intention of going in by himself. Reconnaissance could be left to drones. He ordered the older soldier to go back and report to Cheng Weiguo, asking him to bring some people to support him. At the same time, Jiang Chen ordered the younger soldier to run to the back door of the mall to guard it to prevent anyone from escaping from the back. After doing all this, Jiang Chen took out a reconnaissance hummingbird drone from the storage space. This type of hummingbird chassis does not have a machine gun mounted on it. Instead, it has a set of relatively light multifunctional video and monitoring equipment, which can be competent for various reconnaissance tasks, and is a very convenient reconnaissance tool. However, Jiang Chen was not completely satisfied. After thinking for a moment, he also installed two fist-sized sticky explosives on the top shell of the drone, to make use of the drone's excess load. After connecting the drone to the computer of the power armor, he carefully approached the mall, then threw the disc in his hand at the entrance of KFC near the mall gate, and controlled the drone to float towards the third floor window. Without making any sound, the disc-shaped drone approached the window sealed by the cloth, and the pin-type camera under the chassis pierced into the cloth. There was nothing suspicious in the room, except a desk and a row of file racks. After cutting a small hole in the cloth, the drone slowly floated into the room. Just below the window, Jiang Chen saw a disc-shaped fragmentation mine. Seeing this, Jiang Chen couldn't help but feel a tingling sensation on his scalp. Fortunately, the asterisk didn't just flip in. It turned out that there were traps everywhere. Not only the window, but also under the open door, there was also an infrared trip mine. However, these things were useless to the drone. Skillfully controlling the drone, it flew directly into the equally deserted corridor and searched the rooms one by one. Most of the rooms were empty, or they were piled with pre-war office supplies. But in the room at the end of the corridor, he saw something different. 4 refrigerator-sized metal machines were lined up in a row, standing at the entrance. Close to the machine, a faint humming sound of the fan can be heard. Is this thing a computer case? But it doesn't look like it. In the middle of the room is a blood-stained operating table. The light coming in through the gaps in the window wood just happens to fall on the blood on the operating table. On the rusty tray are 3 or 4 scalpels. From the blood, that has not yet completely turned black, it seems that an operation has been performed here not long ago. What is even more horrifying is the paint bucket placed in the corner. The bucket is obviously not filled with paint, but blood mixed with minced meat and cold severed limbs. Fuck. Jiang Chen, who was staying outside the mall, cursed inwardly, his stomach churning slightly. These things are obviously not what a mall should have. Just as Jiang Chen was operating the drone to fly around the room, searching for something that might reveal intelligence, a faint sound came from downstairs. With a thought in his mind, Jiang Chen immediately operated the drone to float out of the room and float downstairs along the stairs. It flew over rows of planes and landed at the door of an office. The door was closed, but that didn't stop the genius Yao. This girl was not only unrivaled in programming, but also had profound attainments in the modification of electronic equipment. Jiang Chen carefully controlled the hummingbird to get close to the door handle, aimed at the mechanical keyhole, and then pierced the probe with the camera on the front. The probe pierced through the keyhole, made a few turns in the keyhole, and successfully passed through the back of the door. The light in the room was dim, but it was clear. There were 4 people in the room, 3 standing and 1 lying. The one lying on the ground was Meng Qian, and the closest to him was a man with a beard. The tall and thin man couldn't see his face clearly, but Jiang Chen's intuition told him that he was dangerous. As for the man with his back to the door, he didn't seem to have much presence, and he should be a small thug or something like that. Damn it, how could this idiot take the medicine by himself? Didn't I tell him not to take the medicine by himself? What's wrong with this thing's brain? A strong man with a beard cursed and kicked Meng Qian, who was lying unconscious on the ground. This kick seemed to hurt Meng Qian and woke him up from his coma. When he realized that he was tied up like a dumpling, his eyes gradually became terrified. What should we do next? Standing next to him was a tall and thin man with a streamlined rifle in his hand. At this moment, he was looking at Menkan, who was twisting on the ground with cold eyes, and said in an emotionless tone, "How about observing for a while first?" The man standing at the door suggested. "That's the only way. At least we have to wait until he wakes up." The bearded man sighed, walked to a chair nearby, sat down, and lit a cigarette. "You, who are you? Why are you tying me up? Are you crazy? Hongbo, Xiaodu, come and help me. These psychos." Menkan shouted at the empty desk, reciting inexplicable names randomly. Judging from the reactions on the faces of those people, the names he shouted should not belong to anyone present. Who can make this guy quiet down? The bearded man blew out a smoke ring, shook the cigarette butt, and said impatiently, "Bang." A wisp of green smoke rose from the rifle in the hand of the tall and thin man. Menkan was completely quiet. The pupils in his wide eyes gradually became blurred. Blood spread along the back of his head, reflecting the creepy blood hole on his forehead. The room was terribly quiet. The cigarette between the bearded man's fingers was smoking, and it froze there motionless. After a while, a piece of ash fell silently. "You killed him?" "That's right," the tall and thin man said disapprovingly. The corner of his mouth twitched. The bearded man was obviously somewhat dissatisfied with the man's behavior, but he seemed to be afraid of some kind, and did not dare to get angry at the thin and tall man. "Well, now it's good. Everything has to start all over again." The bearded man slapped his thigh, flicked the cigarette butt in his hand, and complained to his knee. "Trash has no value," the thin and tall man said nonchalantly. "But at least we can learn about the situation of that camp from him. Now, we don't even know whether he has had contact with those blueskins." The man standing at the door said helplessly, "I don't know whether it was because he realized his carelessness or because of his extreme arrogance." The tall and thin man did not explain his companion's complaint. After a moment of silence, he said in a commanding tone, "Use mutant flies, inject the drug into their toxin sacs, and then release them around the shelter. I will be responsible for the operation. You go find 2 mutant flies back." The head-sized fly attacks by shooting stinging maggots, and is one of the most disgusting creatures in the wasteland. Although it is not very aggressive, the bacteria it carries are varied, and it is very troublesome once it is touched. "Do you want it alive?" The bearded man raised his eyebrows. "Yeah." The man nodded. "Are you kidding? Capture 2 mutant flies alive? Do you think that thing is a rabbit?" Perhaps the tone of command made the bearded man really unbearable, and he shouted at the thin and tall man, "If you are infected with mutant bacteria, I can help you deal with it." The thin and tall man said in the same indifferent tone, "Hey." The bearded man sneered disdainfully, "I won't let you touch my internal organs. I tell you, we, the Crimson Chamber of Commerce, are just partners with you, not your servants. Is this what your boss meant?" The thin and tall man said, "We help you enter the shelter, and you give us the formula of the medicine The thin and tall man suddenly raised a finger, and put it to his lips. The room was quiet in an instant. "Discovered?" Exclamation mark. Jiang Chen swallowed his saliva, and began to retreat with the drone. However, at this moment, something unfortunate happened. Because the keyhole had not been oiled for a long time, the probe made a slight sound when it was withdrawn from the keyhole. "Who's there?" A loud shout came from behind the door. The man near the door quickly turned the handle and broke the door open. Seeing that he had been discovered, Jiang Chen fortunately pushed the power of the drone engine to the maximum. With the buzzing sound of electricity, the drone rushed into the room with a hum. The tall and thin man raised the muzzle of the gun, but the moment he saw his face clearly, Jiang Chen's heart was shocked. "Lin Chaoan? Question mark? How could it be this guy? The member of the Rebel Alliance, Lin Chaoan, who had met him at the Bullet Shell Tavern in the 6th District? Exclamation mark. He almost forgot about this guy. After agreeing to cooperate against mutants, he had no news. He didn't expect to meet him here. Lin Chaoan pulled the trigger, and at the same time, Jiang Chen reflexively pressed the switch of the sticky bomb. The drone signal was interrupted, and Jiang Chen looked up at the 2nd floor of the mall. About half a second delay. Boom. With a roaring explosion, Scarlet flames flashed, and the wooden board sealing the window was blown out more than 10 meters away. Jiang Chen was confused as he looked at the thick smoke billowing out of the window. He was completely confused. What on earth was going on? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298 Nuclear Hand Bomb. The vibration from the explosion could be clearly felt even 10 meters away from Lake Mall. The explosive equivalent of the two sticky explosives was about 2 kilograms. Reference: a grenade is about 200 grams. Although there were no fragmentation props such as steel balls, the shock wave of the explosion was more than enough to shatter the internal organs of the 3 people in the room. After all, it was a century and a half later in terms of building technology. The mall that survived the nuclear explosion did not collapse because of the 2 kilograms of explosives. Looking at the billowing smoke, Jiang Chen thought that the people inside should have been killed, so he pulled out the tactical rifle from his waist and prepared to rush into the mall. However, at this moment, a variety of shouts suddenly came from the mall. Obviously, there were not only these 3 people in the mall. The explosion alarmed other people in the building. Those minions holding rifles quickly rushed to the first floor and bumped into Jiang Chen, who was about to enter the mall. In terms of reaction, Jiang Chen was one step faster than these people. The tactical rifle in his hand spewed out flames, and he knocked down 3 or 4 of them in one encounter. However, those mercenary dressed gunmen were obviously not easy to deal with. When they saw that they were facing a power armor, they all lowered their heads and walked through the rows of hangars and leaned behind the nearest bunker. The rifles in their hands were not the toys that the CIA showed off in the factory last time. They were still a threat to the power armor of the same era. Several rounds of bullets scraped against Jiang Chen's front armor. Although he didn't penetrate, the huge kinetic energy of the bullets still made him feel uncomfortable, and he had to retreat behind the bunker. After all, the T3 type is an airborne power armor. If it is a land combat type weighing more than 1 ton, the bullets hitting the body will be just a tickle. Damn it, I must get a land combat type to play with if I have the chance. The cement residue peeling off the edge of the wall scraped the armor shell and made a clanking sound. With his back against the bunker, Jiang Chen cursed inwardly, then took a deep breath to calm down, and took out 5 heat-sensing grenades from the storage space and threw them into the door. Several heat-sensing mines flew towards the bunker, where the mercenaries were leaning in a parabola. The grenade suddenly stopped in the air, and the tail flame sprayed from the side corrected its direction, and it seemed to have eyes, and rushed towards the heat source. Several decoy bombs huddled in the corner. Boom. When the explosion came, Jiang Chen breathed a sigh of relief and stuck his head out of the bunker, but a few clanging explosions suppressed him again. Fuck. Jiang Chen cursed and glanced at the damage assessment of the power armor. Fortunately, the bullets only left a few dents on his helmet and did not cause greater damage. Obviously, the 5 heat-sensing grenades did not work. After all, high-tech products are not rare in the wasteland. Laughter rang out from them all, and several mercenaries shouted at Jiang Chen at the top of their lungs, shouting obscene words. Is this all you can do? You didn't use any force when you were born. Ha ha ha. You're wearing a power armor, and you can get a chicken to be more durable than you. Long Tao, why didn't I realize before that you're quite humorous? Had repressing the anger in his heart, Jiang Chen took a deep breath, and a grim smile slipped across his lips. The storage space opened, and this time he took out a metal tube the size of a ballpoint pen. Hide for me again. Leaning out of the cover, Jiang Chen suddenly threw the ballpoint pen in his hand into the mall hall, and then quickly ran away from the mall entrance. Seeing Jiang Chen running away, the mercenaries were immediately anxious, and picked up anti-armor weapons to chase him. Fuck you, don't run away, if you have the guts. However, this insult was swallowed up by the arc of light, before he could say it out loud. Dazzling light flashed, and the high energy particle flow even blurred the holographic screen in Jiang Chen's helmet for a moment. The shockwave pushed down the wall at the door without any suspense, and blew the cement block to the street corner more than 10 meters away. That was not a ballpoint pen, but a nuclear grenade. This thing was made of more than 500 kilograms of uranium oxide that Jiang Chen left falling. There was a layer of lead shell on the outside, a layer of uranium nitrate for detonation inside, and 1 g of uranium oxide pulled into filaments in the pen core. Just 1 g of uranium oxide. Only 60% of it participated in the chain reaction, but even so, it had a terrifying power equivalent to 12 tons of uranium nitrate. Almost 2 walls of the first floor of the mall were blown off, leaving only 2 rear walls of the main structure and some bare steel skeletons. Let you stinky mouth. Jiang Chen opened the mask, spat viciously on the ground, then put on the mask again, and started the air filtration system of the power armor. Even the radioactive dust produced by the explosion of 1 g of uranium is still not to be underestimated. Especially in such an airtight space, one must be careful not to exceed the threshold of radiation. Walking forward and looking at the tragic situation of them all, Jiang Chen couldn't help but be shocked. Because he was not sure about the actual combat effect and the handling of uranium oxide was not easy, he only made one of these grenades. While marveling at the power, Jiang Chen also secretly made up his mind that he must ask Lin Ling to find a way to make more when he returned. Stepping into the mall, the mercenaries who were clamoring before could no longer find complete bodies. It is difficult to say whether they died because their body fluids were heated to boiling point by thermal radiation in an instant, or because they died from the shattering of the shockwave. Stepping over a pile of black rags, Jiang Chen was too lazy to even take out his gun and walk towards the stairs. No one can survive an explosion of this magnitude. However, at this moment, a warning flashed through his mind, and he instinctively jumped back and started the 2 pairs of vortex engines behind him. A faint blue arc of light flashed, pushing him back quickly to the door. Almost at the same time, a figure fell swiftly from the hole in the ceiling and hit him hard where he was originally. Boom. In the dust, he saw a faint blue laser sword and a face with half of its head cut off. Under the burned skin, mechanical parts could be seen. What the hell is this? Exclamation mark. Cyborg! Exclamation mark. Jiang Chen's heart was shocked. He quickly retreated and pulled out the tactical rifle from his waist. The man was also unambiguous and rushed over without delay. What the hell are you? Jiang Chen roared and pulled the trigger to the bottom. This guy is obviously not a human. The bullets burst out instantly and formed a firepower net. The man did not answer, but the lightsaber in his hand changed. Like an open umbrella, the light particles peeled forward from the sword body and melted the bullets. Seeing this scene, Jiang Chen was so scared that his hair stood up. It can melt steel core ammunition. I'm afraid that the C-type steel power armor will not be able to withstand it. Although the power armor is coated with a scattering coating on the surface and has a certain resistance to laser bullets, he dare not bet whether it can defend against the continuous output laser sword. The bullets are empty. The man did not give Jiang Chen time to change the magazine. The light particles gathered into a sword again, dancing with simple sword flowers and stabbing at Jiang Chen. In this lightning moment, Jiang Chen gritted his teeth and his pupils shrank. Unparalleled. This power above the berserker. He has not used it since the last fight with the lead mutant. It was like being soaked in cold water from head to toe, and all emotions were thrown out of the body. Jiang Chen felt that his brain was clearer than ever before. Nitrogen shield. Jiang Chen silently said and unfolded the ring on his left arm. The violent airflow burst out instantly, and the high-pressure nitrogen formed a circulation, blowing away the high-heat light particles and cutting off the lightsaber that touched his chest. The instrument parameters were reflected in his pupils. Jiang Chen suddenly raised his steel boots and stepped on the man's broken face. At the same time, he turned off the vortex engine and stood firmly on the ground with the reaction force. Seeing that the lightsaber had lost its effect, the man simply threw it aside, took out a dagger from his pocket, and rushed over again. Seeing that there was no time to change the magazine, Jiang Chen simply threw away the rifle in his hand, and also pulled out the dagger tied to the waist of the power armor, and met him hand to hand. However, at the moment when the 2 daggers touched, the dagger in the man's hand cut the dagger in Jiang Chen's hand without any resistance. Although he was surprised by the sharpness of the dagger, Jiang Chen was not panicked and dodged the attack. Particle vibration cutting dagger. Jiang Chen muttered to himself and dodged the second attack from the man. The buzzing sound, when it came into contact, did not escape his ears. He had heard Sun Jiao mention this kind of thing before, but it was the first time he saw it with his own eyes. It is said that this thing can cut C-shaped steel like tofu. His back was pressed against the wall. Seeing that Jiang Chen had no way to escape, the man smiled with only half of his mouth left and chopped the dagger in his hand on his head. At the same time, Jiang Chen raised his left arm, seemingly unable to resist. Chapter 299 Cyborg. Robot. Squeak. The teeth-grinding friction sound was lost, and a trace of surprise appeared on the broken mechanical face. However, before he could express this surprise with electronic components, Jiang Chen's right hand had already slapped his face, grabbed his neck and turned around, and pressed him against the wall. With the sound of mechanical cracking, the robot's jaw moved. After a simple struggle, he gave up struggling when he saw that he could not break free from the power armor's arm strength, and his eyes glanced at the dagger embedded in his left arm. Why? He moved the dagger, but it couldn't move at all. After releasing the Washang mode, Jiang Chen stared at the robot with a grim smile on his lips. Obviously, it's stuck. At the moment the dagger cut through the left arm armor, Jiang Chen, who activated the Washang mode, burned all the circuits of his left arm with the active overload method. The high temperature generated instantly caused the steel armor to expand, and the cut tightened instantly, clamping the vibrating blade. The particle cutting dagger that stopped vibrating was no better than an ordinary knife. Given the reaction speed of the human brain, this seems impossible. The cyborg said. The power armor reads the blade's motion parameters and visually estimates the distance between the blade and the armor. All you need to do is pinch the watch to burn the circuit. Jiang Chen sneered. To maximize the existing combat capabilities, this is the horror of the Washang mode. Abandon the entire left arm armor? It's a brave move. The cyborg laughed and glanced at the dagger that was smoking. The forced fixed blade caused an overload, and the particle vibration cutting dagger was also burned. Can you tell the truth now? What the hell are you? Jiang Chen tightened his hand on his neck and threatened. Lin Chaoan, we should have met in the 6th district. Sparks flew from his neck, and the cyborg stuttered. Jiang Chen was stunned, and narrowed his eyes. Are you a cyborg? Yes. Lin Chaoan said calmly, showing a hollow smile to Jiang Chen. The crystallization of technology. I don't have time to listen to your nonsense. Now you have two choices. Tell me everything you know in your mind, such as the Crimson Chamber of Commerce, the Rebel Alliance, etc. Or, let me tear it into parts. Jiang Chen threatened with a cold look. Shelter 027 has been regarded as his territory by Jiang Chen. If someone plots against his territory, he will naturally not be indifferent. On the other hand, the Crimson Chamber of Commerce is also his old enemy. Ko Jin-sang died at his hands. However, what makes Jiang Chen most uneasy is the Rebel Alliance. Lin Chaoan claims that they are survivors of Jia City and aim to fight against the rule of mutants. However, so far, the Fishbone base has no information about them. Not knowing what the other party is thinking is more frightening than knowing what the other party is plotting. I choose the latter. What? Jiang Chen's pupils shrank, and he locked his eyes tightly on the mechanical pupils. I choose to be torn into parts by you. With a dong sound, Jiang Chen kicked his right leg and broke it, revealing the bent steel alloy skeleton. I'm not kidding. Jiang Chen said coldly, increasing the strength of his right hand. I'm not kidding either. Lin Chaoan said indifferently, even shrugging emotionally. Do you think it's meaningful to threaten a cyborg? The unit price is 101,000 subcrystals. If you break it, I can just make another one. As he said that, a puff of green smoke suddenly rose from the back of his head, and he stopped moving. Jiang Chen was startled, and quickly tore his neck, then took out another tactical dagger, and cut open his metal skull. The internal structure was already burnt. It seemed that he chose to self-destruct. Damn it. Taking out the black main control chip, Jiang Chen cursed inwardly, and threw the chip into the storage space. A cyborg made of 100% machinery? Jiang Chen suddenly thought of Lin Ling. That guy was also a cyborg, but it was only partially mechanically modified. And this guy doesn't have any cell tissue at all. It can only be said to be a pure robot, right? The Rebel Alliance? Why is it related to the people of the Crimson Chamber of Commerce? Without a clear idea, Jiang Chen shook his head and threw the mechanical limb into the storage space. When the time comes, let the people in the shelter study it and see if the technology can be restored by reverse engineering. But he really couldn't imagine that the mercenary who drank with him was actually a robot. Thinking of this, an indescribable chill climbed into his heart, and Jiang Chen shuddered. Walking to the side, Jiang Chen picked up the laser sword that Lin Chaoan had thrown aside from the ground. This thing looks like a flashlight, and there are 3 adjustable modes. There are 3 small words on the grip button, namely sword, shield, and blade. Jiang Chen has not seen the 3rd mode yet, and it seems that the robot has not had time to use it yet. After pressing the switch, Jiang Chen held the laser sword forward and pressed the blade switch. The dark blue light flickered, and there was nothing unusual other than that. He gently moved the sword, and the dark blue light beam swayed slightly like a willow branch as he moved. Looking at the soft sword, Jiang Chen's heart moved, and he swung the sword towards the wall not far away. The lightsaber seemed to be broken in the middle. The broken part turned into a light blade and flew towards the concrete wall. Without making a sound of kinetic energy collision, the light blade disappeared into the concrete wall. Is it the long-range attack mode of the laser sword? Jiang Chen muttered to himself and walked into the wall. The light blade burned a blade mark on the concrete wall. He stretched out his finger and poked it, and it easily pierced into the concrete wall. Although the heat could not be felt through the power armor, it can be imagined that the temperature was very high from the fact that it could melt the concrete. He glanced at the energy bar on the side of the hilt. My goodness, just by swinging the sword, 20% of the energy was lost. No wonder that guy didn't use this trick. After playing with it in his hand for a while, Jiang Chen threw it into the storage space. The laser sword was obviously not very useful for him who was keen on firepower and armor. But it might be a good choice to give it to others, although he hadn't decided who to give it to for the time being. The vibration dagger had been burned, so Jiang Chen ignored it and went upstairs. He went to the 2nd floor and came to the half-destroyed room. Jiang Chen walked in directly. Looking around, Jiang Chen couldn't help but be shocked at the miserable situation in the room. The walls were burned black, and the tables and cabinets were swept by the shockwave and piled up against the wall. The 3 bodies had been blown up beyond recognition, and it was impossible to tell who was who from the outside. Jiang Chen had no doubt that, if he opened the mask at this moment, he would definitely smell the smell of barbecue. From the position of the bodies lying, Jiang Chen roughly distinguished which one was the bearded man. He walked to his side and squatted down. Holding back the nausea in his chest, Jiang Chen took out the EP that had been blown up. Although the EP was blown up, the chip inside was well preserved. After inserting the chip into the computer of the power armor, Jiang Chen read the information stored in the chip. Encrypt. Seeing the password box sticking out in front of him, Jiang Chen was not angry, but was delighted. Since there is a password, it means that there must be some shameful secrets here. What he is most worried about is that the clues will be cut off. As for the password, it should be no problem if Yao is asked. After searching the area and confirming that there is nothing missing, Jiang Chen walked downstairs. However, just as he stepped down a step, he heard a violent beast roar and a shrill scream from the back of the mall. Jiang Chen's face suddenly changed. That voice, Chapter 300 Mother of Deathclaw. It's the Deathclaw. He will never forget the fight with the Deathclaw above Shelter 005. Then there were sporadic gunshots, and then the gunshots stopped abruptly, and the screams also stopped. The screams should have come from the knight he sent to guard the back door. Jiang Chen's face was a little pale. He opened the map and found that the green dot behind them all had disappeared. Fuck. Jiang Chen cursed inwardly. He didn't have time to go through the main entrance. He stepped on the blown open window and jumped down from the 3rd floor, which was more than 10 meters high. The airflow of the vortex engine blew away the snow, and the steel boots hit the ground heavily, smashing 2 spider web-like pits on the concrete road. Roar. The violent beast roar collapsed the snow on the roof. Even the steel shell of his power armor was buzzing because of the roar. With the tremor of the earth, something was running towards this side. Fuck, this is definitely not an ordinary Deathclaw. At this time, a name that even Sun Jiao would turn pale appeared in his mind. Mother of Deathclaws. Jiang Chen's face became paler and paler. Not to mention that his left arm armor was completely paralyzed. Even if it was not paralyzed, it would not end well if he confronted the Deathclaw head-on in this terrain. Not to mention the mother of Deathclaws. Not daring to hesitate, Jiang Chen gritted his teeth and immediately turned on the sliding wheel under his feet. The best strategy is to run away. If you can't beat me, can't I outrun you? However, before he moved 2 meters, 2 woo idling sounds came from his feet. Fuck. Boom. Along with the curse, a black shadow suddenly embedded into the window next to it and smashed half of the wall. Jiang Chen caught the after image with his peripheral vision. It was a mechanical exoskeleton of the fishbone base, and the flesh and blood inside had obviously been eaten clean by the Deathclaws. At the same time, the nearly 2-story high Deathclaw fiercely broke into the street. It was awakened from hibernation, and its desire for meat had penetrated every cell in its body. Its eyes, as big as copper bells, were fixed directly on the iron lump standing in the middle of the road. Jiang Chen, who was wearing power armor. This guy. A drop of cold sweat slid across Jiang Chen's forehead. He felt like a one-armed swordsman in the Roman Colosseum, and he was facing a grizzly bear that had been hungry for a whole winter. There was no choice to escape. Without skid wheels, it was impossible to outrun the strong Deathclaw with 2 legs. Turning your back on this beast would only make you die faster. The weakness of the Deathclaw is that there is only a spine and eyes protected by a layer of cortex. Recalling this sentence repeatedly in his mind, Jiang Chen stared at the giant Deathclaw, looking for flaws in it. The mother of the Deathclaw also locked her eyes on Jiang Chen, and her amber pupils flashed with bloodthirsty light. To be honest, it didn't like to reject this kind of prey wrapped in iron lumps, because the edges of steel might cut its mouth. However, it was so hungry enough to eat a mountain of meat, and the human before was not enough to fill its teeth. Jiang Chen took a half step back with his left foot. The amber pupils shrank suddenly, and the timid behavior of the prey stimulated its animal nature. Roar. Taking a meteor-like stride, the mother of Deathclaws rushed towards Jiang Chen. It was hard to imagine that such a huge body could move so flexibly. However, the beast didn't know that if a human wanted to run away, the first thing to retreat should be the right foot. Jiang Chen's right knee exerted force, and under the dual drive of machinery and muscles, the sole of his foot actually cracked the concrete road. He rushed towards the beast head-on. The vortex engine power modulation was the maximum, and Jiang Chen locked its movements tightly, deviating the collision route of the power armor. 5 sharp claws-like blades scraped out a residual image, and lifted off 2 pieces of armor on the left arm like sweeping snow. Jiang Chen swayed, and gritted his teeth to stabilize the balance of the power armor. With the opportunity gained by the paralyzed left arm armor, he moved away from the Deathclaw mother, and rushed behind it. In the blink of an eye, he took out the remaining 4 sticky bombs from the storage space and threw them on the back of the Deathclaw mother. Because of its huge body, the Deathclaw mother could not stop in time, and it maintained its inertia and crashed forward. Die. Jiang Chen pressed the detonation switch with a ferocious look. The scorching flames exploded on the back of the Deathclaw mother, and the impact of the airwave directly knocked its huge body to the ground, rolling several times, and crashing into the window of a shop nearby. Looking at the billowing smoke, Jiang Chen did not dare to be careless. He raised his right arm without stopping, and the rotating triangular barrel locked the center of the smoke tightly. Roar. The roar shook the smoke away, and the scattered dust outlined a arc-shaped ripple. Beating his chest, the amber pupils were filled with even more brutality. It was enraged. Fuck. You're still not dead. Jiang Chen cursed, and pulled the trigger. Da. The bullets formed a net, tearing through the smoke, but failed to tear open the chest of the Deathclaw. The solid keratin armor actually withstood the sweep of the minigun. The mother of the Deathclaws protected her eyes with one hand, and rushed towards him with the other hand. Almost biting her teeth, Jiang Chen kept suppressing the fire, while turning on the vortex engine to fly backwards. What the hell? The spine is not broken, and the bullet can't penetrate it. Is this a living creature? It's like a cheat. Jiang Chen cursed, and uttered 2 swear words, his eyes flickering. In the open area, he didn't dare to use the ability to travel. There was no guarantee that the explosion of the nuclear grenade would not attract nearby scavengers. If they were seen, it would be a trouble after all. But now, can't he care so much? Just when Jiang Chen made up his mind and was about to start the travel to avoid this thing, the calm communication voice interrupted his channel without authorization. The Jagged Panda 02 has arrived at the battlefield. Marshal, please maintain the current motion vector. Jiang Chen was slightly stunned. Before he could react, a beam of orange-yellow arc light brushed past him and pierced through the chest of the Deathclaw without any suspense. It was the reinforcement sent by Cheng Weiguo. Jiang Chen was ecstatic. That guy, I didn't expect to bring the Jagged Panda parked in the camp. The 4-meter-tall mother of Deathclaw was blown away like a piece of paper and hit the wall. At the same time, the sound of the shell breaking the sound barrier slowly floated from behind Jiang Chen. The 5-kilogram mass blasted a bloody hole as big as a basin in its chest, and at the same time, peeled off the flesh around it, revealing the pale jagged spine. Is it over? Looking at the billowing smoke and dust, Jiang Chen muttered to himself with relief, and stopped the miniature machine gun on his right arm. However, at this moment, his pupils suddenly shrank. The mother of Deathclaws lying in the ruins twitched her limbs. Jiang Chen originally thought that it was just like a dead frog kicking its legs, but he was surprised to find that the tissues that were shattered by the explosion were healing. Jagged Tiger 02, shoot the head of the Deathclaw. Jiang Chen shouted and ordered. Okay Marshal, reload, fire, boom. The broken soil and snow rushed up to a height of more than 10 meters. Letting the cement debris jingle on the armor, Jiang Chen stared at the position of the mother of Deathclaws. Without the head, the mother of Deathclaws was completely silent and no longer moved. Jiang Chen breathed a sigh of relief. If it weren't for the support of steel, he would almost sit on the ground. Confirmed kill, Mr. Marshal. Please don't do such a dangerous thing next time. It is the mission of knights like us to charge into battle. Although the driver's voice was a little teasing, the reverence in his tone was not difficult to hear. It is human nature to worship the strong. With only a set of power armor, he was able to fight the Deathclaw mother on equal terms. Although Jiang Chen was not aware of this, in the eyes of others, he was already extremely strong. Okay, you have plenty of opportunities. Before that, let Cheng Weiguo come over and give me a hand. I feel that this armor has been completely destroyed by me. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.